A young man is flung into another world with no special skills or cheats. He's left with only a young body and a glowing status screen. Desperation claws at him as glowing eyes pin him from the tree line. Fear roars in his veins. How will he survive this savage, unknown wild? Mamiya Uto, a salesman for a certain company, charges back to work once again beneath a searing, unrelenting sun. Shoved into an itchy suit by his boss, he storms through the city, ranting about that stubborn superior and kicking himself. He should have driven, even if he had to pay the fuel himself. Utah toils at a company that devours its employees' emotional energy. Stuck in a toxic, underpaid hell, he wears a brittle smile because he's terrified he won't find another job if he quits. He scrapes by on meager pay, trapped in a relentless loop of the same grind, clutching tiny bursts of relief, like the electric rush when a new book finally drops. Uto devours tales of ordinary people ripped into other worlds and granted godlike powers. They yank him back to the fantasy games he used to play, and diving into those pages feels like a lifeline out of reality. He jokes about being whisked off to another world. Then a mysterious voice erupts from nowhere. "I've found you." Utah watches, breath hitching, dread knotting his stomach as a strange figure floats near the company building. He gapes at the unexpected apparition, whispering it must be a ghost, while the man beside him reels, scrambling to make sense, both nailed to the spot, stunned. Darkness slammed over Yuto as he plummeted into a bottomless void. An unfamiliar voice introduced itself and apologized for snatching him so suddenly. And Yuto, confused and terrified, scrambled for answers as the reality he knew was ripped away. A mysterious, godlike figure materializes and drops a bombshell on Yuto. He's being sent to another world. Shock jolts him and he scrambles to connect the dots, spotting the dead giveaways of a classic Isekai. Dazed, he gapes at the person with a bun-shaped hairstyle, trying to tell if there's some kind of god. Uto clings to the idea it's just a heat-fueled dream, until a divine figure steps forward and proclaims the space undeniably real. She drops a bombshell. She's sending him into a fantasy world teeming with magic, weapons, and raw abilities. Spellbound by the idea, Yuto's excitement surges and he blurts out, asking for an overpowering skill. Slowly, he forces himself to accept this is no dream. It's real. Yuto fires the question, "Do I get a special skill?" The new smiling figure answers bluntly, "No." Startled, Yuto stumbled back and demanded to be sent home, snapping that plunging into another world with no advantage would be suicide. Deflated, he told himself it was a dream and tried to walk away. The celestial figure declares Uto will willingly be sent to another world. His hidden, gnawing dissatisfaction with his life is precisely why she could materialize before him. Surprise slams into Uto and shakes him to his core. He finally confronts his pent-up frustrations and can't deny the truth in those words. Yuto flashes back to his student days, when he sank hours into virtual worlds and gorged on isekai dreams. And he admits he craves that world but refuses to be hurled into it without ironclad guarantees. With danger closing in, he storms forward to seize a powerful skill, a cheat ripped from the god who summoned him, and furious spits on surviving by willpower alone. Impatience snapped. Uto lunged at the entity, fury in his voice as he snarled that he had no physical prep, no magic, no combat skill, then accused it of wanting to watch him suffer and die in another world and demanded, "Is that your goal?" Desperation explodes from him. He screams that sending him like this is a death sentence, and he refuses to go quietly. After begging until hope nearly died, Yuto erupts in relief as the entity finally says yes and vows to help him. They promise it'll make him young again. Uto blusters for a reset to 0 years old. Sparks fly until they settle on 13, and he insists on getting a skill or blessing too. They slide Yuto a handmade status screen he can summon at will, and grinning at the progress, he dives back into the negotiation with laser-focused ferocity. Yuto demanded an overpowering skill, roaring that a mere status screen was useless. The entity, fed up with endless complaints, snapped and flung him into the new world, and as he tumbled out screaming, Yuto realized nothing had actually improved. The entity watches, utterly spent, dropping a long, ragged sigh while frustration coils tight in its chest. As Yuto hurtles toward the new world, the entity watches with an enigmatic smile and proclaims he'll be the most blessed existence. Yet his fate hinges on his choices, to awaken and destroy, or to be destroyed. She leans in, eager to see which path he'll take. Utah jolts awake in an unknown forest and spits a string of curses at the bun-headed god who dumped him there. Confused and unprepared, he rants that he's just an RPG player with 0 survival game experience. Hunched behind a rock, the cold, brutal truth of this world slams into him. Yuto forces his breathing steady and stares at his body. God actually rewound him. He's younger. exactly as promised. And though confusion claws at him, he clamps his jaw. No time to complain, he has to move. Uto relived the negotiation with the god, seething that his greed cost him a better deal. He'd traded for only a younger body and a blinking status screen. He clings to the tiny win he managed to seize, using it as comfort. Now that he's in that world, he refuses to surrender, admitting he went up against someone far above him in power and authority. The urgency hits and Yuto snaps into survival mode, storming through his pack and checking every single item he brought. A flashlight primed to cut the dark, spare batteries bundled like lifelines, screwdrivers lined up like weapons, company papers fanned into a telltale stack, a calculator waiting on the edge, an unused phone cold and silent, pens itching for ink, a battered notebook begging for notes, and a cluster of work tools ready for action. Creatively, he snatches anything he can turn into an improvised tool or weapon and races to secure shelter, water, food, and a fire before night falls. Determined to survive, Yuto rips his own clothes to move faster despite the agony of stiff shoes, then steels himself to accept his fate and fight to the last breath, glaring at the bun-headed fiend who sent him here. As he adapts, a white circle blooms at the edge of his vision. The status screen button? Confusion tightens his chest, then a spark of clarity. He's starting to decipher the rules of this new world. Udo jabbed the white circle that popped into his sight, and a colossal figure ripped into existence before him, leaving him utterly dumbstruck. He reels backward, shock slamming into him, and then, stunned, he realizes, this is vital, something that could change everything. Yuto slams his status screen to life. Rage flares as the gigantic display swallows his entire view. He bends it with his mind, yet still rips into the bun-headed god's awful design choice. He leans in, eyes locking on the screen. His name, Level 1, only basic attributes. The blessings and skills slots lie empty, proof no special power was granted. Yet he studies every detail with hungry curiosity. Uto plunges into the skills screen and his jaw drops as more than 100 skill types burst onto the menu. Combat, magic, support, even crafting. He realizes he can burn points, likely earned from leveling up or clearing quests, to unlock skills. Each skill flashes a progress bar showing if it can be learned or upgraded, so he snatches a pen and jots down his starting status to get organized. Head buried in his skill list, Yuto misses a monster closing in. It lunges at him with brutal speed, the classic early-stage menace. Terror rips through Yuto as the truth hits. He's never fought before. Doubt claws at whether he can defeat it, and unskilled and unprepared, he's suddenly hurled into real danger in this new world. Uto clamps down on panic, sharpens his mind into a tactical scan, spots the creature, just a bit bigger than a rabbit, and realizes he must outguess its next move to survive. The creature's horn is a death sentence. One direct strike would probably kill him, or at least leave him helpless. Stripped of healing skills and items, Yuto knows a single mistake can be fatal, so he steels himself and moves with razor-sharp, calculated caution. Sensing the monster's charge, Yuto snaps a split-second decision. Unarmed and untrained, he wraps his jacket like a cloak and grips it tight before his chest, eyes hard as flint, ready to fling the fabric as a blinding distraction or slam it up as an improvised shield the moment the attack comes. The monster barrels toward Uto at full speed, exactly as he'd predicted. He hurls his jacket to cloud the creature's sight and throw off its aim. When the charge connects, Yuto plants his feet and steels himself, determined to flip the fight despite his lack of combat skill. Yuto flings his expensive suit into the monster's path as bait to steal its focus. As the creature charges, he rolls hard to the side, seeking to seize the split-second opening to counterattack. The plan lands, only partially. The monster explodes into frantic twitches, throwing off anyone who tries to close in, and Yuto roars for it to stop, every muscle coiled as he scans for the tiniest opening. Yuto roars, binds the beast with his sturdy tie and rams its own horn into its body. Grimacing at wasting such an expensive tie, he throws everything into this final gamble. After the strike, he crashes to the dirt, panting, lungs burning, eyes glued to the monster as he wonders if it's finally dead. Bone-weary, Yuto refuses to celebrate and hunts for somewhere safe to sleep. He spots a towering tree and plots to climb it to pass the night. He draws every ounce of power from his reborn body, bellows wild shouts, and rockets upward. Remembering office tricks, he turns his belt into a lifeline, letting creativity and survival instinct fuel every desperate pull. From the treetop, Yuto scans the endless forest and realizes he can't even see an exit, much less a city. Sweat and battle wounds ache as he knows the bun-headed really threw him there to die, and that being's comforting words echo while he faces the brutal truth. Completely lost but still standing. Crushed by despair and the pile of problems looming ahead, Yuto studies the scene and hatches a plan. Fixing his gaze on the sun, a possible plain, and a river beyond the forest, he decides to head that way. Everything feels impossible, but a tiny door to the future creaks open. With a determined smile, he declares he'll cross that forest no matter the cost. Mamiya Yuto remembers how it all began. A bun-headed god hurled him into another world. Stripped of special abilities and armed only with a rejuvenated body and a status screen, he fought through a desperate first day and survived by sheer courage and razor-sharp thinking. Spent the night perched in a tree, exhausted but alive, and ends his introduction with a determined smile and a happy ending, at least for now. Uto snaps awake, sore from a restless sleep atop the tree, fury flaring as he realizes he's still trapped in that world. He snarled about the missing comfort of his soft bed, ripped into a stretch as every muscle protested, and plotted his next move. He sets his sights on a river, scavenging for food along the way. The horned rabbit he felled tucked away as a last-ditch reserve. And though exhaustion claws at him, his will to survive blazes on. As Uto readied himself to press on, his eyes locked on the multifunction watch still strapped to his wrist. A bolt of clarity hits him. This gadget tells the time and points north with its built-in compass. And stunned he hadn't noticed sooner, he practically vibrates with excitement at how modern tech can flip the script even in another world. Uto jolts at a thunder of wings and cries, then exhales as he spots the birds hungrily gorging on ripe fruit. He scrutinized the fruit, declared it safe, and with hunger clawing at him he risked a bite, praying it wasn't poison. Wary yet triumphant, a grin burst across his face at finally finding something edible. Uto gathers and devours the fruits, each bite fueling a fierce rush of progress. He ripped open his status screen and watched the gathering skills experience bar leap upward. Probably from grinding fruits, he feels his taijutsu sharpen with every clash against the horned rabbit. And it hits him. Skills level up by repeating actions. Game mechanics bleeding into his new reality. Yuto spots the world system is basically a game, and a wild grin rips across his face as excitement rockets through him. A fierce hope flares. This mechanic might actually keep him alive. Elated by the discovery, he charges forward with steadier, bolder steps. A strange flicker catches his eye in a nearby patch of forest. Curiosity claws at him, and he edges closer to investigate, heart hammering and blind to what waits. A goblin steps out and Uto's breath catches. He falters, unsure he can strike something so human-looking next to the horned rabbit. Convinced it's a threat, he steels himself for the fight, certain he won't lose this time. The goblin locks onto Yuto and rockets forward, shrieking, and Yuto's face snaps taut as the creature hurtles at him, every stride seething with murderous intent. Blindsided by the aggression, he recoiled on instinct, heart slamming as the truth hit. This was way worse than he'd imagined. The goblin's savage strike hurled Uto through the air. He crashes across the dirt, skidding to a stop as the blow lands and every nerve screams. Battered, but stubborn, he hauls himself up while the goblin bellows, daring him. The fight's just begun. Realization slams into Yuto. He'd underestimated the goblin. Even after landing a hard strike, being stuck at level 1 leaves him outmatched, so he limps away, furious at his own naivety for charging into a straight-up fight unprepared. Yuto snaps awake. Goblins aren't simple, injured, dirty NPCs, they're real enemies. He shoves every naive hope aside, hardens his gaze, seizes a makeshift weapon, and charges forward to kill the enemy without hesitation. Wounded and soaked in blood, Yuto pins the goblin to the ground and throws every ounce of strength into the attack. The creature thrashes, but he doesn't hesitate. One precise blow ends the fight. Gasping, lungs burning, steel resolve flared as he clawed his way to survive in that brutal world. Uto claws his way to a tree, battered and gasping. He clamps a blood-soaked rag to the wound as the jolt of realizing he underestimated the enemy slams into him. Pain lances through him, but he knows his quick reaction kept things from getting far worse. Now, praying his wound won't get worse and scorched by the lesson that every choice here can cost dearly, Uto limps back to the spot where he fought the goblin and senses something off. The truth slams into him. This new world isn't a game. It's cruel and lethal. He stumbles onto a mutilated body and reality slams into him. In this place, death comes easy, so he vows to be far more careful from now on. Stepping into a patch of strange, inky mist, he's blindsided by a sudden crushing pressure slamming into his back. His body snaps rigid, every muscle locking him in place. A powerful shove sends him crashing to the ground. He hacked and sputtered, his brain scrambling to figure out what had just slammed into him. He rockets back to his feet from the last impact, only to have a strange creature erupt from the ground right in front of him. Reeling from the hit, he freezes, stunned by the creature's impossibly cute face. For a heartbeat, his mind shorts out. Then focus snaps back as he remembers he was attacked. Suspicion flaring as he tries to figure out how something that adorable managed to land a strike. The protagonist is blindsided as the creature's fingertips flare, and it begins weaving a spell. He never had time to decode the magic. Panic claws through him when he realizes the attack's already in range. So with nowhere to run, he slams his briefcase up and braces it like a desperate shield. The spell slams into his briefcase. He snaps it up like a shield and barely keeps the blast off him. Even with the impact reduced, the strike still smashes into him like a freight train. Its force so immense he knows one more blow and he won't be able to resist. He can't keep hiding behind the briefcase or dodge with any confidence. So he throws caution aside and sprints headlong at the enemy, betting his life on the strike. The creature snaps to life, crackling energy coalescing as it readies another spell. The protagonist roars, pouring every ounce of strength and grit into a thunderous kick that slams into the creature and cuts off its magic mid-cast. A savage blow slams into his face, blood gushing out as the fight dies in one crushing strike. Our hero silenced this creature before it could unleash another spell, then let out a long, trembling sigh as relief slammed through them. He crumpled at the base of a tree, breath ragged as he replayed the danger, when a notification flooded his vision. Level 2. Pride surged through him. Then the thrill was ripped away as the world bared its teeth, cruel and relentless. He jolted awake, utterly spent. The night spent perched atop a tree hadn't shaved a single scrap off his exhaustion. His battered body drags like lead after back-to-back fights with a goblin and a mole. Bleeding and aching, he has to clean that wound now. He staggers on, filthy and parched, every foul stench and bone-deep exhaustion clawing at him until he realizes he's about to snap. Water's rush yanks him upright. He dashes, panting, to the spot and finally finds what seems to be a spring. Relief floods him as he asks if he's finally arrived where he wanted. He spots the water. A surge of energy explodes through him. He rockets forward, shouting with relief, and hurls himself in, finally able to refresh and care for himself. Washed clean and with water coursing through him, he lunged into corralling the bare essentials, arranging a lifeline to keep himself alive. He scrubs and scours his clothes, puts the surroundings to work, strikes drinkable water, hauls in fish, bags rabbit meat, then checks his haul and knows he has enough to sustain himself for a while. He yanks the trap he rigged from the water, fish thrashing, and lets out a triumphant roar. His idea has paid off. Food and water secured, he zeroes in on learning fire magic. Then, voice sharp and fierce, he shouts his new goal and steels himself to push even further. He bolts back to his makeshift camp beneath the waterfall's thunder. He rips open the skills menu, dumps his hard-earned level-up points into fire magic, flashes a confident grin as he slots the first point, then, fired up by his progress, pours in even more. He bursts into celebration when he learns fire magic level 1, certain he can unleash devastating spells. Then the skill description slaps him awake. It's a feeble spark with under 10 magic power. Confusion exploded into fury. He seethed, asking why he didn't learn something flashier, like a direct fireball. He didn't fully understand it, but curiosity burned in him. He dove headfirst to test his new skill. Brimming with confidence, he points ahead and roars, "Fireball, activate!" Anticipation crackling as he tries to ignite magic for the very first time. He keeps hammering at his fire magic. First he shreds the phrase, yanking activate out because he's convinced that word is dead weight. He frantically cycles through hand gestures, convinced one will tip the scales, and when nothing happens he refuses to stop, relentless determination fueling every attempt. He hurled attempt after attempt, flinging frantic gestures. Still nothing happens. Patience snapped. He seethed, furious that he'd poured 2 precious points into the skill and still couldn't use it, and he demanded, raging, "Why won't this work?" He sucked in a breath and willed calm into his pulse. The mole's magic snapped into focus. It had spewed a black mist, maybe magic made visible, and he realized he couldn't trigger his own power because he lacked the crucial short enchantment skill. He learned fire magic, but without it, couldn't spark a flame, so he grits his teeth and forces out a single incantation, hoping the right words can stand in for the technique he lacks. A spark of inspiration hits him. He drops into a battle stance, slashes the air with a dramatic gesture, hurls an improvised incantation begging the fire spirit for aid. Then, fueled by faith and raw desperation, he screams the magic name again. Fireball! He poured every ounce of seriousness and hope into the incantation and got nothing. Frustration exploded when even changing how he pronounced fireball didn't work. He explodes with rage, roaring, "It didn't work at all!" as confusion claws at him, leaving him even more baffled about what he's doing wrong. Desperation drives the protagonist to try everything. He chants the same incantations until his throat burns, pleads with the fire spirit, screams different command variations, even mimics the mole's casting sound, and amid the chaos invents a frantic fire dance. None of it works, but he keeps insisting, determined to make the magic happen no matter what. Spent and seething, after endless failed attempts, the protagonist slams his spellbook shut and vows to abandon magic, for now. Huddled in his makeshift shelter, a chilling thought claws at him. The spell will only answer to that world's tongue. A voice he, an outsider, can't possibly speak. No solution in sight, exhaustion claws at him and he finally caves, crashing into sleep. The next day he seethed, unable to summon fire. He'd been itching to roast the fish and rabbit. With no other choice, he prepares to cook the old-fashioned way. Then a goblin erupts from the shadows, claws bared and dagger drawn, smashing his plans once more. He cut the goblin down in an instant and a cold thrill washed over him. This kind of combat was starting to feel like second nature. Moments later, he spots a rabbit and his stomach roars. He abandons his failed attempts at fire magic. Fed up with the endless survival grind, he vows to find a village and break the cycle. And though parasites terrify him, he gnaws raw fish for now, the taste firing his resolve to change his life. While sketching his plans for the future, a surge hit him. He'd just leveled up and learned a new skill. Rush. His frantic scan of the combat list comes up empty. Moments later, he locks onto the technique. He rips through the description and finds he can surge forward at 30% of his attribute speed for up to 5 meters, then whoops and throws his fists in the air, convinced he's finally making real progress. Buzzing with the new skill, he tries to trigger Rush while frozen in place, and it refuses to answer. Remembering how fire magic failed him when he stood still, he bolts forward and tries Rush on the run. This time the technique explodes. He rockets forward, stunned by his blazing speed, and after so many failed tries, he finally tastes victory. The protagonist bursts into triumphant cheers as Rush kicks in and they realize it works. The skill devours his mana but can be unleashed without shouting its name. It's of little use now, yet he imagines deadly surprise attacks. Then a strange flaw demands his attention. Whenever he unleashes that skill, his shoes rocket off his feet. Drained from pushing the Rush skill to its limits, he finds a high, goblin-proof perch by a river and fruit trees, sinks into its comfort, and claims it as his new base to regain strength and prepare for what's next. The protagonist steels himself and rips open his status screen, combing through every stat. He sees he gains 3 attribute points per level, and pictures that if the cap is 99, his final stats could soar to about 300. Reading his numbers, he realizes skills feed off those stats. Fire magic clings to intelligence, Rush to agility. He's fuzzy on when he learned dash, guessing it auto-unlocked at a certain level. So he abandons fire magic for now and zeroes in on efficient growth. His eyes track percentages exploding upward. Earth magic intake surges and presence detection spikes with every move. He senses a link. Every time he slays a horned rabbit, improvements kick in. He realizes victories don't just sharpen his combat. They rocket his whole growth and spill into other useful skills. Fueled by resolve, he realizes that taking down more creatures will skyrocket his evolution. He sweeps his gaze over everyday crafts, cooking, forging, gathering, and the pattern snaps into place. Everyone here picks skills to build the life they want. A jolt rips him back to the game he used to play. Players slayed monsters, cast lines for fish, basked in the scenery, or chased pure fun. And like in the game, he realized the world let people live any way they wanted, each forging their own path. The protagonist flashes back to his game days when he chased only power, clawed his way to the top of the rankings, and earned the title God of Cessation across every server. Virtual glory cost him everything. He dropped out of college and was kicked out of his home. Yet he admits that stretch was the most fun of his life, because this new world, its status, skills, and evolution mechanics, feels exactly like the arena where he once ruled as the best player. Nostalgia hits him like a freight train, almost bringing him to tears as the old excitement surges back, like he's standing once more at the summit of his virtual life. The new world's pull screams possibility, but he bites it back. He's an adult now and refuses to repeat his old mistakes or lose himself again. He collapses onto his cot and begs the night for a single good dream, a fleeting sliver of peace in the midst of this brutal new journey. He springs his plan into action, flinging pebbles and mimicking the monster's cries until 2 beasts charge in, and he tears through them with casual lethal ease. Satisfied with the plan, he whooped as the stonebait strategy paid off and cheered when his level rocketed to 5. Riding the stonebait victory, he stops fearing moles and discovers they drop hefty XP, especially into earth magic and presence detection, while unarmed goblins barely give anything, and he's left wondering if the goblin who used his staff was a rare spawn since he's never seen another like it. While lost in thought, He jolts at a distant scream. Panic flares as he imagines a monster or goblin. Then relief crashes over him when the cry reveals a human voice. Worried, he sprinted toward the sound, picturing a woman or child under attack, then dove in without a second thought to check. He sprinted toward the scream when a mole burst from the ground. He didn't lose a beat, firing a savage kick that sent the monster flying. Dirt spat and roots snapped where the creature had climbed up from below, and he instantly knows others must be close. He bolts forward, glances up, and finally locks eyes on a group of people, the very ones who'd been calling out. As he barrels closer, he realizes the ones in danger are 3 children, 2 of them tearing off in a frantic sprint. With a lone dagger, the third fends off the goblins, fighting like a man possessed to shield his friends. Danger tightens, and he knows he must act now to save them. He spots a pack of armed goblins closing in, one brandishing a jagged sword. And though he's dodged group fights until now, he refuses to hesitate, sprinting forward with fierce resolve to stop them. He refuses to watch anyone die before his eyes. Fear claws at him, but his decision is carved in steel. He'll protect them with every breath. The protagonist sprints to the boy facing the goblins and fires off a blunt plan. "I'll take 2. You handle the rest." And the boy, stunned and confused, goes silent. He charges forward anyway, daring the other to read his intent and stand with him in the fight. At last he gets the plan. Resolve blazing, he lunges to the protagonist's side, and together they snap into combat stances, shoulder to shoulder. Brimming with confidence, the protagonist lunges first, convinced victory belongs to those who strike without hesitation, and together they barrel forward, smashing into the goblins at full force. He unleashed everything into the swing, his blade cleaving one goblin, the next strike sailed wide, and he snapped. "Damn it, I missed!" Rage boiling in his chest. He spots another enemy closing in. The battle's far from over, so he steels himself and snaps into razor-sharp focus. In the thick of battle, he realizes he's finally adapting. Brimming with fresh confidence, he charges the sword-wielding goblin, lands a lightning-quick punch that sends the creature sprawling and its blade skittering across the dirt. Proof he's learning to survive this new world. Bleeding and limping, the protagonist grits their jaw, swallows the pain, and charges back into the fray with iron determination. He unleashes a crushing, decisive blow and at last fells the goblin. The boy at his side froze, awe ripping through him as he realized his companion had just felled a goblin single-handedly. Seconds later, a voice blasts his name. Someone spotted his courage. The boy realizes the goblin still hasn't noticed the protagonist and is dead set on the boy. He sizes up the scene and realizes the protagonist will land the finishing blow if he hesitates. Rage boiling, he barrels in to snatch the final strike, dead set on claiming the victory himself. Before the boy can land the final blow, the protagonist rockets forward and drives a fatal strike into the goblin, leaving the boy frozen in shock. Clenching his jaw and locking eyes, the protagonist spits a curt apology. He couldn't let them snatch his victory. And his grit pays off as his level surges to 6. He fixates on the ruthless last hit bonus common in MMORPGs. Whoever lands the final hit pockets every reward. He probes whether the system holds in that world, and it does. Still, the victory tastes rotten. He finally reached the place he'd been chasing but gave in to raw greed. And now he's terrified he ruined everything by snatching the other boy's chance. Relief crashes through him. He doesn't need to worry as the 3 youngsters he saved beam at him and pepper him with cheerful thanks he can't understand, their smiles saying it all. Relief surges through him as he spots the wall of language, so he waves his hands and drags his words out, pleading for a moment. They nod, clearly understanding and radiating goodwill. He yanks the skill. Otherworld language comprehension to smash the language barrier. Level 1 gives him only a 5-year-old's grasp and fury boils inside, so he slams another point in and rockets to level 2. Now he only understands at an 8-year-old's level. Outrage surges and he roars that the tiny improvement is an insult, feeling utterly cheated. Frustration simmering after spending every free point, the protagonist grits his teeth and pushes language comprehension up one more time. This time he finally reads the group's stunned faces and gets why his sudden change shocked them. Relief floods him. He thanks them for waiting and presses them for answers about what happened. They stared, calling his sudden grasp of the tongue a prayer to the goddess, and he waved it off, saying he'd simply blanked on the language for a moment. He fires the question, "Do you live here?" They revealed they live in nearby Bezat town. They'd come to the forest to hunt horned rabbits, but goblins ambushed them on the way. Pata snapped the wagon rings, and everyone bolted into the trees. They tore into each other. Pata snapped he'd only followed the order to sprint straight ahead. May shot back that she trusted Zinc to beat the goblins, and Zinc growled he couldn't face armed goblins alone. Amid the confusion, he watched with a discreet smile as the noisy pack's uproar folded into a strangely comforting, familiar safety. Even hyped that the world felt like a game, he realized he'd been numbing himself to the brutal fact he could die. With no survival skills and no one to rely on, a single mistake would have killed him. Seeing the city children chattering cheerfully around him, a fierce shift surges through him. He realizes with a jolt, he's no longer alone. He grabbed her hand, locked eyes, and declared, "I'm fine." Worry flashes across her face. He confesses he was lost, relief washing over him at finding them, then begs to make it back to Bezart Town before sunset. Spiky-haired boy sizes up the situation and snaps it's possible if they hurry. They size up the odds. Pata staggers, shoulders screaming under a heavy basket, but the group's convinced they'll reach the forest edge before sunset. "We need to bolt now. My flashlight still works." Everyone erupts. The kids gasp and whoop, utterly dazzled the moment they lay eyes on the sleek modern gadget. The kids clutch the flashlight like a magic wand, shrieking that his odd clothes must mean he's an aristocrat. He snaps the conversation shut, barking for focus and warning them time's nearly gone. Zinc lunged to the front the instant he spotted the Seer River, declaring he knew the way and pushing for a shortcut through the forest to shave off time. Zinc blazes ahead, leading the group through the forest, then in a heartbeat dispatches a rabbit with a surgical, lightning-quick strike. Silently, he painstakingly wipes his blade as the others trail behind, eyes fixed on him. The protagonist, May, and Pato fall a step back, matching his stride. Zinc snatches his sword, snarling he'll use it instead of the knife, barking there's no time to gather magic stones or monster parts. He just wants to test the blade's cut. The protagonist stares, wide-eyed, as talk of magic stones and body parts lands in their ears, and May laughs, saying the 4 stones are tiny and low value but perfect practice for beginners like them. He snaps back. He's no noble, just a low-class corporate slave. May lights up at the title, picturing him tending impossible beasts. Zinc and Pata are convinced he never sold the magic stones because he's rich. May declares they're a team. Zinc hunts down prey, she gathers materials, Potter hauls every load, and the protagonist's jaw drops as they move with clockwork precision. "Aren't you terrified, May? Of plunging into a forest teeming with monsters?" She admits it's terrifying, explaining her family runs the pharmacy, and some villagers mend wounds with magic. Herbs and fruits sell in town while real medicines are too costly and sit unsold, so she wants to earn money to help them. He praises her resolve, then spots something strange about Pata and calls him. Spotting Pata panning and bone-tired, worry flares in the protagonist and they blurt out an urgent offer to slow the pace. Pata winces, apologizing for being slow. May scoffs that he always handled farm work fine, but now he's faltering. She reveals Pata still can't understand the protagonist's language and vows to beg the goddess for the language comprehension skill at her next prayer. The protagonist leans in, intrigued. They press on, and when Pata admits he's still struggling with farming, everyone goes silent. The protagonist says praying to the goddess is like spending skill points, and sharp-eyed Zinc spots something strange beneath the tree, not above it. He slams his sword into the ground, declaring hoolie moles are hypersensitive to sound and will surface if they're close. And the protagonist's eyes widen in shocked recognition. The protagonist raves about Zinc's knowledge, and Zinc flashes a grin, saying he learned everything from his father, a seasoned hunter. When asked if he'll adventure again, Zinc admits he'd only ever brave the Rock of Plains, and only in the distant future, because it's crawling with powerful monsters, and the protagonist realizes Zinc treasures May and Pata far more than any quest. Zinc's confession lands like a punch. He lives only with his mother and he must get stronger, fast, if he's going to support his family. The protagonist feels the crushing weight each of them bears. Zinc inherits a deadly job, May stakes her life for money, and Pata abandons his studies to toil on the farm. He watches them, same age as his current form. Shoulder-crushing responsibilities, and a stunned realization hits. Maybe noble actually fits. Mid-stride, Zinc's eyes cut through the quiet. None of them have introduced themselves, so he punches the silence with, "So, who are you?" In the heat of the moment, he blurts, "I'm Loki," then tosses out a quick apology for the late intro, a raw electric beat that proves, even amid the chaos, he's starting to fit in with the group. The moment someone said Loki, the 3 youths froze, shock ripping through them as they instantly thought Demon Lord Loki, a name feared and famous in that world. The protagonist, not fully grasping the impact, lets out a flat "eh," stunned that their own reaction came out so exaggerated. It hit him like a punch. Loki, the name he'd blurted without thinking, was his avatar's handle in the game he was addicted to, the one dubbed the God of Cessation. Loki towered as the strongest, most recognized player. Now that legendary name shadows him in this new world, risking dangerous misunderstandings. Loki steels himself, swearing he won't breathe a word about coming from another world or the strange status the bun-headed god bestowed on him. He lives for the rush of his status climbing, admits he's obsessed with snagging the last hit in battle, and swears he never meant to lie about his name. And he can feel himself sinking deeper into this new world without even realizing it. Loki bursts with excitement every time he plunges into the new world, bristling with skills and possibilities, and he admits he picked the name Loki because it fit, capturing his raw enthusiasm and tying him back to his player past. Now he winces at how cringeworthy that name sounds, but it couldn't be truer to the way he moved and the feelings roaring through him then. Loki's smile died, and cold shock slammed into him when he realized they'd mistaken him for the Demon Lord himself, because of the name he'd chosen. He reels, wondering how it all spun out as the three shout that the story's Demon Lord, black clothes and all, fits him perfectly, calling him not a noble but the Demon Lord, and Loki now has to wrestle with the wildfire of fame he accidentally sparked. A spark of suspicion lights in Loki. The creature with the bun-shaped head didn't simply bring him here. It dragged him into this world to forge him into the Demon Lord. Hungry for answers, he leaned in and demanded to know what the tale of the demonic Loki really meant. Zinc fires a blunt answer, launching into the tale of the Demon Lord's subjugation, and the others suddenly remember he used to dress just that low-key. Every tongue spits the same legend. A black-cloaked Demon Lord rose from the dark, marshaled monstrous hordes and unleashed terror and ruin. Then a hero descended from the light, brandishing a sacred blade that bathed the world in holy fire. The people celebrate this tale as a living legend, and Loki realizes, with a cold jolt, that by adopting that famous name, even unintentionally, he's just painted a target on his back. Everyone calls it a heroic legend, but to Loki the pieces fit eerily well. He hears whispers of Takuya, the legendary hero who appeared out of nowhere, crossed over from another world, and vanquished the Demon King. To everyone else he's treated like a near-divine figure. But the name hit Loki like a slap. Takuya was someone he'd known in his past life, and the coincidence gnawed at him, feeding a growing suspicion that none of it was accidental. Rage boiled in Loki's veins as he remembered the summoner handing skills to everyone else and leaving him empty-handed. Meanwhile, people buzzed with curiosity. The others gossiped, eyes alight, and dreamed of racing to the capital to meet someone from another world. Zinc yanks the excitement out of her voice, snapping that they can't afford it. They're practically broke. A cold click hits Loki. He starts to suspect he isn't the only one ripped from another world. Loki's eyes lock on a mole up ahead and he bellows a warning. Zinc rockets forward to meet one head-on while Loki pivots right to take out the other. And May and Pada drop into hiding, obeying instantly. In the thick of the fight, a strange, satisfied thrill wells up in Loki. This chaos feels exactly like the new world he'd been expecting. Loki remembers when he played solo, chasing nothing but cold efficiency. Now he sees a united crew where everyone hits their mark and joyfully splits the spoils. Watching Zinc, May, and Pada, he dares to picture the future of this strange new world. A fierce spark flares. For the first time he senses there's something beyond numbers waiting for him. Real friendship. Battered and breathless, the group burst through the last trees and tumbled into safety. Relief slammed into them, and they erupted in wild, triumphant roars. Seeing Pada sag from exhaustion, Loki springs forward and offers to hoist the heavy basket form, proof he's finally fitting in and ready to shoulder his new companion's burdens. Loki and his ragged crew finally spy Bazaar Town shimmering on the horizon as the sun dips low, its last light sealing the end of their long journey. May beams at him, shooting a bright, grateful smile his way and thanking him for coming along with them. Spotting the town gate, Zinc, May, and Pada bolt toward the guard while Loki watches, impressed by their speed. The guard recognizes them and snaps at them for being out so late. Loki steps forward, curious about the reception, and the three reunite, relief and joy flooding them. The guard seizes Loki's sleeve, voice trembling with relief, and thanks him for saving the three youths. Loki brushes it off, insisting they only helped each other in the forest, and everyone's attention snaps to the goblin's sword. Zinc says the blade is brand new and impeccably kept. Suspicion flares as the guard leans in, jaw dropping at its pristine edge and masterful craftsmanship. The guard officially hails Loki into Bazaar, flinging the gates open and proclaiming him the children's hero and savior as they urge him inside. He crashes through the gates and finds a bustling, welcoming town waiting, the spark that ignites his new journey in an unknown world. Loki flings the sword at Zinc, insisting it's too long for him to wield and, since he was saved too, it would be wrong to keep it. Zinc refuses, he can't use it either, and they're suddenly locked in a tense standoff. Just as the conversation starts to drag, a guard cuts them off and barks, "Finish this at the Hunters Guild tomorrow." Loki bids them farewell as the group showers him with thanks, crowning him their savior even as murmurs insist he's an aristocrat, or even the demon lord. The guard grabbed Loki's sleeve and demanded he come to the guild the next day to report the sword-wielding goblin. With the dust settled, the group breaks into cheerful strides and drifts through the town, while Loki lingers, a faint smile curving his lips. Loki's breath catches. Only the mole he took down solo dropped skills, proving the finishing blow locks in the experience. The truth hits him like a punch. Relying on others will choke his growth. The group had been fun, but he decides that if he wants to become stronger, he'll have to give up making friends. Loki barrels into town hunting new gear, and though he'd flirted with forming a crew, he knows he can't expect others to hand him the final hits. The town crackled with life around him, and as he watched it all unfold, a single hunger exploded inside him. Meat, more than anything. Loki darts to a food stall for a bite, then his jaw drops when the vendor spits out a price in a currency he doesn't recognize. Beaky. Confused by the local cash and flat broke, he swallowed his pride, bellowed for his friends, and desperately begged to borrow money, even at 32. The protagonist jolts awake, dazed and disoriented, in a strange place ringed by a choking tangle of branches. Voices yank him awake and he blinks at the racket. Then realization hits. He's way up in a tree. People below stare up, relief written on their faces that he's alive. And he knows he caused a commotion, but he's still scrambling to make sense of it all. The night before was a total mess. Bursting from the forest, he peels away from the group and scrambles to find his footing in a strange new world, only to be stranded by useless local currency, unable to buy a decent meal or a proper place to sleep. He collapses under the stars, a cold jolt reminding him he's trapped in a game world, so he steels himself to its brutal trials with weary resignation. Meanwhile, a girl in town spots him, bolts over and cries that she'd been looking for him. They reunite and she fires a teasing scold for him crashing out in a tree. Laughing she'd have sheltered him if he'd asked, and he admits he only noticed he was out of money after they'd parted. Electric with excitement, she yanks him forward, shouting, "To the Hunters Guild! The others must already be waiting!" He bursts into the Hunters Guild and freezes. This cavernous hall thrums with life, packed tables groaning under steaming food as servers dart by. The legendary mission board glares from the wall and he realizes those papers were quest requests. He rejoins the group. They shrug that they came earlier and already ate, and he mumbles an apology while every tempting dish tugs at his attention. Starved for days, he falls to his knees and begs for a single piece of meat, vowing he'll repay the favor. The moment that first bite hits, pure ecstasy rips through him. The juiciness and seasoning slammed into him, stirring fierce emotion as he hailed it a feast fit for a fantasy world, and the pleasure exploded so loudly he gaped at the stranger's voice roaring from his own throat. He's mid-bite savoring the meal when an elegant woman drops his name, reminds him of yesterday's brutal mess, then says the guildmaster wants to see him. He freezes and blurts, "Are you with the guild?" As dread tightens his chest. Forcing a confident smile, he accepts her request and falls in step behind her, his mind racing through every possible reason she could have called. Guides led him into a hushed chamber, and at last he stood face to face with the master of the Bizart Hunters Guild. Yagov announces himself, apologizes for calling out of the blue with polite bluntness, then offers his left hand for a handshake. Odd, but the protagonist meets it with a respectful grip, feeling the full weight of the moment. He thrust his hand out, declared Loki, and locked grips with Yagov, the guildmaster. He drops into the seat across from him. Amanda suddenly plants herself at his side, and he goes rigid, discomfort written all over him. Yagov cuts to the chase, thrusting something into the protagonist's hands with a glare that screams, "We need to talk, this is serious." Yagov thrusts a heavy, jingling sack of coins into the protagonist's hands. The mayor thrusts a reward at him as thanks for saving the children. Stunned, he protests he only acted on impulse, then admits the money will be a lifeline since he has no resources. Thanks with raw sincerity while Yagov declares the gift official recognition of his deeds, outsider or not. Yagov throws out an offer to join the guild as a hunter, and the protagonist grins. The job fits him like a glove, but he hesitates, warning he doesn't intend to stay long in the town. Yagov proclaims the Hunters Guild an independent, nationally recognized force whose registration holds in other countries, and the protagonist, struck by his blunt, respectful manner, leans in and starts seriously weighing the proposal. Mid-conversation, Yagov declares you can pinpoint where someone's from just by watching how their mouth moves. His face goes stone serious as he reveals the protagonist's language isn't any he's ever known. The protagonist goes taut, realizing he's already stood out, but admits this strange new world still has a lot to teach. Yagov drops a bomb. 10 days ago, 2 hunters vanished into the Great Palmera Forest. One of them had just restored his sword before they set off. A sharp voice cut through the air, drilling the protagonist for a blow-by-blow account of what he'd been doing in that forest. He wasn't even a registered hunter. He feels their questions like knives, and knows they're eyeing him for blame. He almost lies, but knows a lie would only dig him deeper, so he snaps. I didn't kill the missing hunters. And, while he won't say why he was in the forest, swears he wouldn't have dared show his face in town if he'd been guilty. The protagonist swears he watched a goblin gnaw on what looked like a human arm 3 or 4 days ago. Yagov's face hardened as he declared the hunters almost certainly dead. The protagonist insists on returning the goblin's sword and tears through the underbrush searching for their remains to give to their families. Then Yagov reveals the two had no close relatives and grants the sword to the protagonist. Yagov's voice cut through the tension. He wasn't accusing the protagonist. He demanded the facts, since incidents like that are part of a hunter's life. He cut the conversation short, announced the registration desk opens at noon, and urged the protagonist to join the guild. He beams, drops a heartfelt best regards, then strides off, leaving everyone struck by his respectful, cordial presence. Stepping out of the room, confusion roiled through him as he probed Yagov's motives. Did the guild master mention the hunter's remains to bait his sympathy? Then recognition hit. Yagov's eyes mirrored his old company director's, that ever-smiling, deeply respected man younger people trusted. After turning Yagov over in his mind, the protagonist backtracks. The man's smile looks warm, but his eyes are empty, and that hollow stare sparks a razor-sharp suspicion. He draws a hard line. He can't stand Yagov and pulls back every opinion he'd held before. Inside the room, Amanda scoffs that the boy reads people too well for his years. Yagov's jaw tightens as he suspects a link to a shadowy group called Those Four, but he stays unconvinced. Amanda storms to the master and reports the protagonist wore bizarre gear. Shoes, a watch, and glasses in shapes nobody had seen before, eerily like the lost artifacts unearthed 4 years ago and classified as second-class secret relics. She points out his watch was still ticking, sparking suspicion. Yagov deduces that if he'd truly found them in the forest, he'd have hidden them, or at least explained their origin. Yet he carried them, as if they'd always belonged to him, which only deepens the distrust. Yagov snaps at Amanda. Don't cross the line, he's crafty. Orders her to tail every boy and feed him their moves, then stares out over the town, brooding on the protagonist who dared take a Demon King's name and itching to uncover the young man's true purpose. Fast. Suspicion coils in him, but Yagov clings to hope that Loki's arrival will jolt the town out of its long stagnation, and with a hard, steady stare he pleads, "Please be good to us, Loki." He sizes up his grim options, steels himself, and concludes joining the Hunters Guild might be his only way to survive this world. Suspicion clung to him, and he eyed the guild leader with distrust, but fire burned in him. He knew he could prove himself there. With that thought burning in his chest, he sprinted back into the main hall as the others erupted in cheers. The choice landed. He'd throw himself into this new world and become one of them. He explodes back into the group, slaps down a glittering heap of coins, the mayor's reward, and, chest puffed, declares he had that money from the very start. They gaped at the mountain of cash, dazzled by money's raw power, while he shrugged and said it was a thank you for saving the children, confessing he hadn't even realized how much his act mattered. I blurted that emergency missions might carry penalties. They shrugged. Those barely ever happen. And one girl snapped, "If this were a real emergency, we'd already be getting way more money." The blonde guy declares there wasn't time for the guild to formalize anything, so the payment was just a thank you. He drives home that hunters exist to help, not to profit. The mood lightens as the protagonist slaps the money down and buys meat skewers for everyone. Yet suspicion still coils in him whenever he looks at the guild leader. He strides up to the guild's registration desk and meets Amanda, who introduces herself as the receptionist, drops that she holds the organization's third highest position, and beams that he remembered her name. Seeing the sway she held, he figured currying her favor would pay off later and, eyes wide with excitement, asked how to register. She, impatient, snapped that all she needed was his name and age. Staring at the registration form, he hesitated, pen hovering, because he knew that scrawling Loki would officially brand him with that identity and lock him in with no way back. Heart pounding, he steels himself and dives into the form. Amanda asks if he even knows how to write. He stammers but forges ahead, and she says the card will be ready soon before launching into a brisk rundown of how the guild operates. Amanda drops the bomb. The guild throws everyone in at rank G, the absolute bottom. He asks where he lands, and she replies blunt and cold, he's starting at G. 7 ranks climb from G up to S, the top throne. Hunters are bound to missions at their level, but the guildmaster can greenlight 1 rank jumps, and since he already took down an armed goblin, he's likely to earn that nod. Yet he knows he'll start buried in simple manual labor. When the protagonist asks how promotions work, Amanda snaps that to climb the ranks. You must pull your weight and prove your skills. You start at rank B with a brutal practical exam, and to reach top rank S, you must pass an interview with the central guildmaster. She slams it home. Rising through the ranks demands brutal, relentless effort. Finishing basic missions won't get you there. He sees the guild as a ruthless meritocracy. The harder he grinds, the bigger his rewards. Excitement roars through him. This is worlds away from the exploitative place he used to work. He stares down the hunter's deadly fate, steels himself to the new world's brutal truth, and soon after the official registration card slaps into his hand. The guild slammed the stamp onto his card and declared him a hunter, and Amanda leaned in, eyes bright, promising she couldn't wait to see his triumphs and to help with any questions. She announces the master ordered her to watch over him since he's still new in town, and surprise slams into the protagonist before a warm rush of belonging washes over him. Curious, the protagonist leans in, eyes blazing, and presses for tips on the best hunting spots. Amanda steers beginners straight into the rarely trod first layer of the Great Palmera Forest, and fires up eager fighters to blitz the Raqqa Plains and Lulu Forest to rank up faster. The protagonist's curiosity flares when he learns the forest hides mysterious zones even the locals don't know about. Amanda warns the shallow edges only spawn weak pests, horned rabbits and goblins, while plunging deeper reveals far deadlier threats. Amanda leans in, ripping open the secrets of the Great Palmera Forest. The first layer is ideal for beginners, but infested with hollows that drive people away. Getting to the second layer takes about 60 days. From the third layer on, monster strength is standardized by level. It swallows a quarter of the continent, and until today, only the Birdmen had ever reached the 5th layer. Our protagonist stands breathless before its colossal grandeur and tangled mysteries. The protagonist declared the Great Palmera Forest a classic game-style final dungeon, secretly tucked right beside the starting village. Buzzing with questions, he pounces. Can low-rank hunters actually beat higher-rank monsters? Amanda snaps that even if they win, they get no mission rewards unless they officially accepted the quest. He thanks her, then notices her annoyance as she mutters that he's suddenly become too cute. He shrugs that he'd accept a smaller reward so long as there's no penalty, which hooks Amanda, suspicion flaring in her eyes as she cuts straight to the chase. Are you planning to go into the deeper layers of the Great Palmera Forest? He slaps on the distant goal act, but his face betrays him. Amanda snaps that recklessness has no place among hunters, and the guild grants no benefits to anyone who oversteps their level. Yet she lets him move on to the next question. After peppering Amanda with questions, the protagonist is told the guild's document room holds more answers. Stunned to find real books on the shelves, excitement surges through him. But Amanda's smile goes sinister as she warns. Those books are priceless. Tear one by accident and you'll be enslaved forever. Fear claws at him and gratitude swells in his chest as he vows, trembling, to be painfully careful. Bursting out of the guild, he exhaled a huge sigh of relief. He hadn't damaged any records, and the close call drove home how valuable paper is in this world. As he walked, he couldn't stop picturing the risk he'd faced if he'd torn something by mistake. His phone buzzes, his colleague's voice explodes with cheer. You finished registering? He beams, says yes, electric with excitement to be officially integrated. They hawked their haul, split the cash evenly, 5 to 500 BK each, when a teammate brought up selling the sword and invited him along. And with no plans, he shrugged, agreed, and said he wanted to check out the weapon shop too. They stride through the city streets, excitement crackling in their voices as they chat and head straight for the place. At the weapon shop, he slammed his offer on the counter. 80,000 BK, insisting the sword was hell to earn, and its value had to be split among 4 people. The blacksmith slams his hammer down and spits. 50,000, take it! Unmoved by their haggling, he snarls he needs a profit, can't overpay for a used sword, then grudgingly drops 40,000 BK and tells them to split it. Narrowing his eyes, the protagonist snaps, You're going to flip this sword on the market? The blacksmith admits it, and a bold, dangerous idea ignites in his mind. The protagonist corners the blacksmith, slaps 60,000 BK on the table, and shouts that the sword's market value is 100,000 BK, so the merchant still profits. Yet the blacksmith stands firm. He can't pay more until he sells the weapon. He drops a bombshell. The sword was bought at that very shop just 10 days ago. Used but top tier, praised even by the guards, and suddenly the conversation pivots into his favor. With a cocky grin, he slams 72,000 biki onto the table for the sword and taunts, "Take it, or I'll hand the blade to another friend." Under relentless pressure, the blacksmith finally buckles and accepts the offer, and the protagonist, spent from the negotiation, roars in exhausted triumph. The merchant barked that the price should have been stated up front. Moments later, the protagonist zeroed in on the knife and launched another complaint. He wasn't finished. At last, he snatches his starting gear. 2 sets of simple clothes for 3,000 biki, boots for 40,000, and a web. He handed over $50,000 after snagging a sweet discount, grinning at his haul and the fair prices as he vows he won't haggle next time. Well, only at that shop. And, decked out like a true commoner, he's primed to launch into his new journey. He nails a guaranteed bed for 3,000 biki a night, crashes onto it, satisfaction roaring through him as his hard-earned progress finally pays off. His eyes devour the scene and he learns their daily rhythms. The bell cleaves the hours, magic stones smolder as fuel, and paper is so rare, wooden boards are the common substitute. Excitement surges through him. He can't wait for what's next and decides it's time to leave and continue his journey. He barrels back into the guild to lock in the special permission for his F-rank mission, and Amanda grins, teasing that he looks brand new and outrageously handsome. Her tone snaps to iron as she reminds him he's still a novice and must assemble a team before he leaves. And stunned by the sudden shift, he promises he'll give it his all. Amanda begged him to team up, but he waved her off and charged in solo. He knew a group would make it easier, yet the hunger for fast cash and a refusal to split the haul drove him into Palmyra Forest. Confident he could handle it alone. He steps through the city gate. A guard's shout brands him a hunter, but he steels himself. This mission is solo. He's about to leave on his mission when a guard clamps a hand on his shoulder and growls, "Be back before nightfall." He spots the worry on their faces, briefly taken aback, then flashes a confident grin, shouts back with eager defiance, and storms into the forest, vowing to face the challenge alone. He rockets into the great Palmyra Forest's first lair, scanning for the most efficient prey, weighing nimble horned rabbits' quick drops against goblins' richer hauls, and alone, opts to farm magic stones since they're light and easy to carry. Caution coiled in him as he vowed today would be a test to learn the terrain, when a rabbit flashed from the undergrowth and he readied himself to strike. The protagonist locks eyes with a horned rabbit and lunges, his level up sharpening his sight so he tracks every twitch. He tests a fresh strike and nails it with surgical precision. Raw power surged through him and his jaw dropped. The status blessing had made him far stronger than he'd imagined, and now, even as an ordinary person, he felt ready to take on the world's challenges. He charged the goblin with fierce confidence, striking clean and smiling as he realized his current power would crush this foe without breaking a sweat. He dove into the battle, exhilaration roaring through him like a game character finally leveling up after a brutal grind. This was, for him, the most fun moment of all. Flush with victory, he barrels on the hunt, but an hour later he's exhausted, filthy, and shaken to his core. He slumped against a tree in the forest, an enemy's body cooling at his side as he fought back tears. The world's harsh truth pressing down until the first electric thrill crumbled into bone-deep exhaustion, and a sick unease at the violence he'd faced. He rips open the monster's carcass to harvest materials, but disgust slams into him. The stench, the slick, slimy texture, and that grotesque sight make him gag. Reality slams him. Those neat school science clips lied. Real life is brutal and far more traumatic, and his clumsy lack of skill only makes everything worse as he scrambles against the scene's violence. Exhausted and caked in dirt, the protagonist rips the magic stone from inside the goblin and clutches it with shaking hands. He gapes at himself for spending so long on one foe. Only the goblin's hand now stands as proof of subjugation, and with disgust he drives his blade into the joint to finish the job, trembling as the brutal truth crashes over him. Blood-slick and bone-tired, he stares at his filthy hands as the crushing truth lands. He'd badly underestimated what hunting alone would be like. Amanda's warnings echo in his head. Regret surges, and he admits to himself he'd been a fool to ignore them, the weight of reality settling on his shoulders. So he stumbles to the river to wash himself clean and, with cold clarity, realizes he never thought about the messy, practical fallout of battle as the myth of lone efficiency cracks under the harsh glare of the real world. Blood-slick and gasping at the edge of his strength, he knows he completely underestimated the danger of fighting alone and rages at himself for thinking it would be easy, the brutal truth crushing him. But he refuses to quit. Wipes the blood from his hands so the knife won't slip and drives himself onward, a fierce, silent roar building in his chest. Today, he will reach his goal no matter what. Back at the guild, he slams his spoils onto the counter, and Amanda's eyes go wide at the mountain of loot as she praises his grit, especially for taking down an armed goblin. She gapes at him, dirt and dried blood crusted over his skin, and blurts a stunned comment. He flushes with embarrassment, scrambles to hide his discomfort, visibly exhausted from the brutal ordeal. Fresh off the mission, he asks what gear a beginner actually needs, and gets chewed out, slammed for going out alone, thirsty with no water, hauling only a weapon and a basket, and standing there with nothing to say. He's shot straight to the sink to wash his hands. He smoothed his shirt and chuckled at the scolding. Trapped in that young body, he looked every inch the chastised boy. Reeling from the hunt's gore, he can't stomach a bite. The attendant offers steaming, juicy meat skewers to cheer him, but his mind keeps snapping back to the dead goblin's face. He begged for one thing: ice-cold water, clutching it like a lifeline to pull his battered mind back from the wreckage of that brutal, exhausting day. His eyes lock on the glass of iced water as he sits silent, forcing his breath to steady. An employee notices the shift and asks if something's wrong, and he lies, denying it while masking the heavy weight of what he experienced. Rooted in the roaring hall, buried in a tide of bodies, he vanished into his own mind, utterly alone, swallowed by his thoughts. His gaze slices the strange world, lands on a man with glasses, and his mind flames with questions, despite standing in another world. The city struck him as unnervingly modern, lamps and utensils jolting his mind straight back to Earth. It hits him. He's no history expert, but it clicks. Of course, this world would naturally evolve its own different technologies. Resting, he pictures transmigrators igniting upheaval with Earth's knowledge, then refuses to chase world-shaking impact and locks his gaze on the single task before him. He gulped the water like it was nectar and praised it aloud, then pushed his hunting hall forward for processing, commanding every guild staffer's attention. Guild employees traded stunned whispers, marveling that he'd wrenched the magic stone free on his very first try. They nod, convinced his relentless grind will profit everyone, while oblivious to their chatter, he's already hunting his next prize, 550,000 biki to snag a short sword. He zeroes in on 3 hunting grounds, the first layer of Palmyra Forest, turf he already knows, swarming with horned rabbits, goblins, and tunneling moles. Rocca Plains still fits his level but hides wind magic praying mantises and poisonous rats, and though it's recommended for rank F, he drafts battle plans before stepping in. Luluve Forest is far more dangerous now. Spiders that spit 50 Samson sticky threads, wolves hunting in packs, and massive orcs prowl its depths. The zone demands rank E, and he admits he's not strong enough yet to face them. Loki tore through the monster patterns around Bazaar City and realized that aside from the gruesome task of dismembering enemies, fighting in Palmyra barely fazed him. The real headache was knowing when to change hunting grounds. It felt like a risk-free video game roam, but this was real and he couldn't play like that. Loki snatches up the collected materials. He rakes in 48,500 biki from a half-day hunt. His jaw hit the floor at the payout. He fired. Does material quality affect the reward? The evaluator confirmed it, outlining 5 value levels from E to A, and announcing that all of Loki's rabbits landed at level B. Loki presses for tricks to keep his hunted spoils from going bad, but they're warning him to stop pushing and actually rest. Amanda frets, and he steels himself, burning with stubborn resolve. He imagines cranking his efficiency and snagging top-tier gear to pull in up to 100,000 biki a day. And even knowing his limits, a white-hot urgency burns in him to evolve soon. Amanda summons Loki for a hunting lesson. He scrambles to escape, muttering that he needs to buy supplies, and she slaps down his excuse with a sharp warning. Don't do anything reckless. At last she slams the forgotten item into his outstretched hands. Loki studies the church, smirk on his face. He can check his status any time, but curiosity gnaws at how others do it. His eyes drop to a church coin and everything clicks. Then a colleague strides up and teases. Finished today's hunt already? Loki strides into the room, locks eyes with his colleagues, flashes a wicked smile, slings his cloak over his shoulder and heads for the door. When Loki learns one of them hasn't checked his status in 2 years, he slams the church coin Amanda gave him into the guy's hand, saying he won't use it anytime soon and it'd be a waste to keep it. The friend hesitates to accept a free gift, but Loki insists and tells him not to worry about it. Loki presses a coin into the church's palm and leans in, asking bluntly how the city verifies someone's status. The boy grins and says it's simple. A blackboard erupts with letters that mark each learned skill and its level, and Loki gets it, but doubt claws. Is his curiosity about the local system too weak a reason? While they hash over the skills plastered on the board, a girl suddenly shouts her abilities, and Loki's composure shatters into panic. He cuts her off, voice snapping. "You can't say that here, it's dangerous." And a boy snarls, "My dad says people with rare skills get kidnapped and sold into slavery." So her face goes cold and she clamps her mouth shut, deciding to keep her talent hidden. They were yakking away in front of the church when a nun popped out and tore into them for the noise, demanding they calm down. She exhales, offers a composed hello with curiosity sparking as she studies the new boy. They announce Loki as the new hunter. The others explain they'd just been figuring out how to check status, and the nun beams, welcoming him and saying he can ask about the church anytime. Loki forces a rehearsed smile and vows to throw himself into hunting monsters. The nun beams, praises his manners, and proclaims he has a promising future. She warns him, never stray from the path of virtue. The goddess is always watching, and blessings fall on those who do right. Loki replayed the nun's words, ruled that Acorn Head doesn't qualify as a goddess, and gave himself the green light to act. He knows daily tasks teach experience, but he chases monsters because combat sharpens new skills faster than anything else. After that, he throws a quick wave, bids his friends goodbye, and bolts into the shops to snag what he needs before dinner. Loki staggers back into the inn, utterly spent, and a grin of relief erupts when he spots fish for dinner. He can't stomach another bite of meat. The reek of monster corpses and the hot spurt of blood when they're cut slams into his memory and nearly makes him retch. Even if it feels like a game, hunting monsters means killing living beings, and that truth makes him recoil. Sitting before the lit lantern, Loki's stare pins the world in place. After everything he's been through, the place finally hits him as real. A mocking barb from someone he knew snaps into bitter clarity, and the cold, brutal weight of this new reality settles over him. Loki watched everyone shrug off the finishing blow. He craved that last strike. Experience and skill only surged into you at the kill. The truth slams into him. The others don't know. They don't have to fight to survive like he does, and that knowledge sharpens his view. He's alone in that brutal logic, driven to grow out of necessity, while the others just go through their routines. Lightning strikes Loki as he realizes his edge. He can read every skill and its exact level, while everyone else only sees a plain list of skills with no numbers. He sees the world as a game, a blatant cheat, and resolves to weaponize that edge. He'll sprint past everyone, treating reality like a progress bar he grinds to max. Loki stares into his own cold, calculating core. He feels others care but pushes it aside to fuel his climb, and even admits he'd exploit people if it meant getting stronger. The reason screams out. In this new world, he can become far stronger than he ever dared dream in his old life. Alone and haunted by the trauma of his old world, Loki feels the past claw at his mind and realizes the hunt for power has been eating him alive. He stares into the swallowing darkness, the decision a lead weight in his chest as he mouths a mute plea to be returned to his original world. And as the light bleeds away, a cold certainty settles. If he keeps going, he will end up corrupted. Loki unearths a savage truth. His name belongs to an ancient demon king felled by a hero from another world, and suddenly he's staring into the abyss of his soul, questioning what kind of monster, or man, he really is. A dark smile splits his face as he confesses he's no hero, stares down the fate ahead and, consumed by fierce thoughts, accepts that if he keeps on this path, he'll become the next demon king and rule the world. Fed up with the silent entity that dragged him into this world, he tore his hopes to shreds, clenched his fist with iron resolve, vowed to live for himself alone and, though he never learned why he was summoned, accepted it. Doubt claws at him as he wrestles with whether to tell the truth about his origin to the friends he made. He snaps awake, every limb leaden and his feet screaming, and when he fights to stand, his body shudders with crippling weakness. Slumped and sweating, a cold truth slams into him. He'd pushed his child body too hard, and regret twists his face as he admits he'd been reckless in a body barely 14 years old. Left without orders in the new world, he goes rogue and charges ahead, only to have his body betray him. His endurance is shockingly low. No messages or instructions arrive. He spots his status lacks a stamina value and, with no alternatives, throws himself into solo training, pounding the pavement 3 days straight. Warming up for another light training day, a blood-curdling scream ripped the air. He bolted into the forest and slammed into the sight of someone being brutally attacked. He bolts into the danger, determination blazing, spots the crisis and dives headfirst to drag the person out of harm's way. He bursts in, primed to help, then freezes when he finds the whole situation already under control. The women shredded their foes without breaking a sweat. One flashed a grateful smile, thanked him for his concern and praised his kindness. He flushed, asked if they were all right, and they shot back a raucous, enthusiastic yes. Back in the village, the protagonist recounts the clash and is showered with thunderous praise for the woman's fearless stand against the enemies. He barrels back early with his basket brimming. When they're stunned by his speed, he just smirks that he hit his goal. And the old man, eyes sharp, nods. Those rumors about his talent were true. He confessed he wanted to vanish into the crowd, not snag a single spotlight. He's hoarding every coin to buy weapons, armor, and gear, plotting to one day explore the Rock of Plains. He figures it'll take about $1.5 million beaky. The man he's talking to freezes at the hall, warning that pulling in that much will make him impossible to ignore, and points out most city hunters only hawk leftovers for pocket change. Nothing like the relentless effort the protagonist pours in. The man snaps that even if he keeps his head down, churning out monster materials every day will ignite a spotlight on him and boost his rep in the guild. And the protagonist mulls it over and realizes selling those materials to specialty shops pulls in far bigger profits. A guildmate warns him not to haul gold coins everywhere and tells him to stash them in the guild. He shoots back that those coins fuel his rank up, so he has to keep them on his person. Shock slammed into him when he realized he could stash his gold coins in the guild. He pictures a ridiculous ambush, thieves crashing in and carting off every coin, seething that Amanda never warned him, and now coinless he bitterly laughs at the irony as the cold truth of how reckless he'd been slams into him. Cutting through the city, he spots someone stepping out of a shop and curiosity ignites when he realizes it's a jewelry store. So distracted he slams into a passerby and fires off a quick apology. Driven by curiosity, he slips inside and a shadowed woman meets him with a single electric welcome. Inside the shop he stops dead. Every jewel hums with raw magic, and the woman fixes him with a look and snaps, "You here to buy or sell?" Clueless about the subject, he snaps up her offer to explain, leaning in as curiosity burns, and he strains to grasp the value and purpose of each item. She launches into an explanation of the magic stones, revealing each color holds a different attribute. Black holds none, red crackles with fire, and the others hide their own powers. She lays out examples, saying stones with no attribute are used every day. The protagonist recognizes a few and gasps as the existence of magic stones with attributes is confirmed. When she pushes him to picture using larger, costlier stones, suspicion ignites and he senses something far bigger at play. They stumbled onto a bombshell. Magic stones could graft attributes onto equipment. His pulse hammered at the thought of dual-wielding two swords, each roaring with a different element. His pulse races picturing combat glory. She snaps him back. Stones are still too pricey for a beginner armed with only a knife. One of the men points to a bazaar shop specializing in enchantments, and she smiles, saying that's exactly what he'd imagined. He froze, eyes wide, when a tiny magic stone sold for 50,000 biki, way higher than he'd ever imagined. The seller smirks and says earth stones go cheap because they're only fit for construction, not coveted like fire or ice. She tosses him a teasing, "Come back when you've got coin, future hunter." And he grits his teeth, nodding in begrudging frustration. Weary and walking, he counts how much coin he still needs just to buy basic gear, then discovers weapons blazing with magic. Overwhelmed by the possibilities, a thrill surges as he pictures them tearing through enemies in combat. He conjured devastating mashups of spell and steel in his head, then let out a soft sigh and declared dinner time. A fierce scent slams into him. He stops dead, heart pounding, recognizes it in an instant and bolts to its source, then arrives to find a lush, vividly foreign scene unfurling before him, and roars that this is exactly the place he imagined. He barreled into the restaurant, eyes sparkling, and declared he knew curry. The chef, all elegance and theatrical flair, unveils an exclusive menu that serves only a spice-soaked curry for 9,000 BK per portion. Before the protagonist sits, the chef locks eyes and dares him. "Do you really have the guts to take on something this intense?" The price made him wince, but desire burned through restraint. He begged for a portion, determined to pay every last coin. The moment the plate landed, he inhaled. Curry's unmistakable aroma and rich color crashed into him. His eyes lit up and satisfaction swelled in his chest as he knew without a doubt it was curry. And the chef smiled, clearly pleased. He dove into the curry, nostalgia crashing over him as memories of wolfing this exact lunch at work flashed back. Spice detonated in his mouth. Heat stabbed him with pain, tears and sweat streaming. Yet through the burn he found a glorious flavor, and hooked he plunged back in, devouring bite after bite. Sweat slicked his brow and his face burned crimson as he couldn't stop eating. Delirious over the flavor, he ravenously tore through every portion, and when the plates were empty he leaned back, blissful and satisfied, flashed a huge smile and thanked them for the meal. He stepped out of the restaurant buzzing with renewed energy and a warm heart. But the bill, 9,000 biki per dish, hit him like a bucket of ice. He was trying to save 1.5 million. He strode away, satisfied and without regrets. The delicious experience had been worth it, and that familiar flavor pricked his suspicion. Were there others in this world who'd come from Earth? He grinned, savoring the curry he'd just demolished. A supreme, spice-drenched masterpiece. It blew his mind, but the bill scorched his wallet, so he'd only splurge on it as a reward. And lucky this time he vowed he'd think twice before wandering into any random shop again. He stepped into the new shop and a warm couple swept him into a hug. The woman introduced herself as Mesa's mother, voice thick with gratitude as she thanked him for taking care of her daughter, and the man declared he was the father. Recognition slammed into him. He'd seen both of them before, and the jars and drying leaves made him deduce this was a pharmacy. Mesa's parents dealt in herbs and often foraged the forest, so everything clicked. Mises burst into view, whooped the moment he spotted the protagonist, and flung out a wild invite to play by the river tomorrow. She grinned, promised warm, inviting water, a shot at fishing, and that she'd bring other friends, then bolted before anyone could reply. Her mother blurted an apology, confessing she'd always been like that, while the protagonist, still dazed, gasped. It felt like being caught in a storm. The hunt burned in him, but he agreed to go to the river with Misa and her friends, thinking people trusted him, maybe because he'd helped them before. Even with the uncanny power to read his own status, he owned up to his limits. Zinc outclassed him in strength and dependability, yet Misa's parents thanked him, trusting the group would be safe with him around. Mesa's mother pressed a small vital bottle of special medicine into the protagonist's hands. She said it melts muscle pain and drains away fatigue, perfect for someone who runs every day like him. Stunned, he asked the price, but she refused any payment, saying it was a thank you for saving her daughter from goblins. He thrust cash for the medicine, but Mesa's mother pushed it away, calling it a leftover bottle she wouldn't take a large sum for. A flicker crossed her face and doubt ignited. Had she only given him a placebo? He flipped his stance in an instant. If even the curry cost a fortune, the medicine must be steeped in rare herbs, so he dared to expect the remedy would work wonders. The protagonist flashed a grateful smile, vowed he'd be back to buy more if the medicines worked, then seized the moment to ask for something to ease his stomach pain. He burst out of the pharmacy. Two distant figures spotted him and instantly recognized him, and he looked like he was about to join his friends for the next event. They buzzed with excitement for the river trip. Mesa exploded with energy, spearheading their departure, while Loki grinned and brandished the cheapest fishing rod he'd bought, insisting it would work. Zinc barked for the items to be stowed in Pata's basket and warned he'd be out with Loki, scouting the surroundings as a precaution during the journey. The protagonist, already moving, wondered how long it would take to reach the destination. His eyes widened when they said the walk to the river would take about 2 hours. The group skipped along the trail as he drank in the wild, untamed world around them, while Pata, shouldering the basket, huffed that all this effort was just to play. By the river, Mesa's eyes danced over the water as the weary protagonist burst into a relieved laugh. After all his effort, he still hadn't caught a thing. Zinc suggested a lunch break, and the group melted into easy smiles, ready to enjoy the moment together. Side by side with rods in hand, they cast into glassy water, devouring the peaceful view as the hush sank into their bones. Pata split his catch with the group, announcing he even brought his mother's lunchbox, while Zinc stared, stunned that Loki couldn't fish, a revelation that knocked the wind out of him. They gathered to feast and soak in the moment, readied the fish for roasting, and Misa produced a gleaming magical tool that sparked the fire and left the protagonist awestruck. Zinc explained it ran on a glowing magic stone, and when they switched it on, everyone gaped at how effortlessly it worked. Heart-pounding, the protagonist hoisted the grilled fish like a trophy, gripping it eagerly as they exclaimed, "I can finally eat grilled fish," and stared, stunned at how useful it was. The group clustered around the campfire, tearing into roasted fish as the protagonist leaned back, soaking up the peaceful view and smiling that he felt at peace. But he stayed at the embers, flipping the grill and warning another fish was nearly done. When the others glanced at what he was skewering, they froze. Insects. Loki shrugged, swore they tasted great with salt, and everyone dove back in, turning the strange fare into a rowdy, wild picnic. Bellies full after a mouth-watering lunch, everyone declared the food divine, grabbed their rods for more fishing as exercise, and Misa fired up the crew by calling for a team battle to crank up the fun. When the teams couldn't be settled, he grinned and tossed out a game from his world: rock, paper, scissors. And the group leaned in, curiosity igniting into excited cheers. Teams snapped into place, and the air crackled with competitive fire as Misa flashed a confident grin. "I won't lose." And Loki vowed he wouldn't go easy either. He teamed up with Pada. They locked into a rhythm as he called for help to shift the stones. Words stumbling so he pantomimed. Pada understood. Relief crashed over him, and his confidence ignited for the challenge. Fueled by excitement, the protagonist barked a barrage of orders to Pata. Shift this rock, roll that slab. While lunging for insects, and Pata sprang into motion, crackling with energy and obeying instantly. He slammed the brakes on his pace when he saw Pata panting, apologized and urged them to slow down. Pata shrugged it off, swearing he was fine, so they pressed on cautiously, moving in sync as they resumed the search. He slammed a hand on Pata's shoulder and snapped, "Don't push yourself. I'm worried your effort will break you." Pata froze, surprise flashing across his face. Then his features softened into a tearful, grateful smile as he realized he'd understood. Tears in his eyes, he joyfully repeated that he understood. And that small gesture meant a lot to him. Comprehension hit like a lightning bolt. Pada flung himself into the protagonist's arms, hugging him tight with a joyous cry and shouting that he could finally speak with him too. The group exploded into cheers, stunned by the sudden leap forward, while he stood there, heart pounding. Could his language comprehension have evolved just from talking to Pata? And had he, without even noticing, become an Isekai language teacher? Bursting with pride, the protagonist rallied the group to a little shop he knew for a special meal. Everyone cheered Pata for his hard work, and buzzing with excitement they headed there together. They tore into a relaxed, joyful meal, grins wide and laughter spilling as they toasted their achievements surrounded by warm, happy company. A few days later he shot upright, lighter and refreshed, proof the medicine worked, so he vowed to ask Mace's mother about the price the next time he saw her. He ripped open his status and watched his skills spike. Charge and presence. Detection had both blasted to level 3, and he grinned as he realized he'd already smashed his original 1.5 goal. Scheming to stash money in the guild, he was blindsided when a furious woman barreled in, shrieking why he hadn't been visiting her. She snapped that she wasn't missing him, but every word dripped with blame for his absence. He blinked, baffled, asked if something had happened, utterly lost as to why she was scolding him. After getting chewed out for skipping, he got electrifying news. His promotion to F rank was confirmed. Seizing the moment, he asked to withdraw his savings and declared with iron resolve. He crackled with resolve, snapped his gear into order, and sprinted toward the next challenge, the Rockaplanes. Cheers exploded as Loki clinched rank F and claimed his brand new adventurer license, the crowd showering him with congratulations. As everyone celebrated, he fixated on the card, curiosity sparking, and asked if its material could be changed. An animated woman, electrified by his achievement, declared the license suited him, and a third person casually replied that, yes, they could make that change. She revealed the license system as a material ladder: copper, iron, silver, even adamantite, each metal marking a rank. You could change a license's metal, but it demanded an extra fee. The protagonist, baffled by the arbitrary swaps, shot back why they bothered, and she said it was common practice, driven by the processing fee. He seethed. And then it hit him. The whole system was a microtransaction. Loki blasted the guild for charging only the rich. Only high ranks even care about card quality. And the woman fired back that the guild was a business and couldn't distribute precious minerals for free. Curiosity exploded in Loki. Could SRANK tied to adamantite really be the ultimate peak? He cut to the chase and asked Amanda point blank if SRANK was truly the limit. Loki scoffed that making adamantite the top-tier material was lazy. Pure lack of ambition. Amanda blinked, surprised, then conceded he was right. Long ago, a higher rank towered above all. Then it was wiped from the records when today's hunters couldn't summon the strength to reach it. Amanda brushed off the lost ranks, saying she'd kept silent because it seemed pointless. Loki's eyes flashed as an idea flared. If current hunters can't climb to that old level, the real power might be hiding outside the guild. A reckless idea ignited in him. If reborn heroes from another world, like the legendary Takuya, truly existed, maybe one of them could claw their way to the lost rank. Loki's mind raced as he pictured the legendary Takumi reborn a prince, never forced to become a hunter. A desperate hunger to find him, if he was still alive, burned in Loki's eyes. And Amanda, catching that steel, leaned in and finally laid out the important truth he'd just brought up. Amanda's grin exploded the moment she caught Loki's interest, and her electric excitement snagged everyone's attention. She dove into the legend of the lost rank, gushing over his cunning. Loki flinched at the over-the-top praise and scrambled to back away, insisting he was low rank and that for now everything was fine. But Amanda pressed on, determined to spill every secret. The next day, Loki crackled with excitement as he prepped for the Rocca Plains, buying supplies and antidotes, hunting down every scrap of information, while Amanda's pressure hung over him like a storm. Thrumming with excitement, he vowed to buy his weapon and armor at dawn, set off with steely resolve, and roared that he was ready to explore the plains. Loki stormed into the blacksmith to order armor. The smith said with the leather in stock it would take 4 days. Then, after a dramatic pause, he corrected himself to 5. Loki panicked at the delay, overreacting wildly, while a nearby figure hissed, "Have you lost your mind for good?" Loki snapped at the blacksmith, insisting he'd prepared everything and risen at dawn for the plains, then urged them to outfit him with ready-made armor. Blacksmith Sirius slammed his palm down and flat-out refused, eyes hard as steel. This was Loki's life, he barked. Ill-fitting armor would ruin him in combat, and there was no off-the-rack child size, so Sirius had to measure Loki first. Loki sagged and let out a frustrated groan. Loki smirked and decided to ditch his armor, recon only. Then, while scanning the weapons, a blade in the display seized him and he practically begged to see it up close. The blacksmith's jaw dropped, but he agreed. Loki snatched the sword and excitement erupted as he wielded it. The blade fit him perfectly and sat squarely within his budget. Loki's breath caught when the sword thrummed with a hidden surge of magic yet bore a price for pennies, and the blacksmith explained flatly that nobody in town wanted to buy it. Enchantments clung to staffs and the local hunters. Only rank E never used such weapons. Yet he forged the sword anyway. When Loki demanded why he'd make something so specific, the blacksmith answered with a hard, unreadable stare that said he had a purpose. Loki's gaze locked on the enchanted blade, and a cold truth slammed into him. The blacksmith had forged it knowing no one in town would buy it. Questions gnawed at him. Then the blacksmith's face went iron hard and voice low he said, "I forged that sword for my own son." Loki's jaw dropped when he learned the blacksmith had a son. He blurted it out and the room froze in an awkward silence. Realizing he'd hit a sore spot, Loki blurted a quick apology. The blacksmith, sad but steady, waved it off and admitted his son was exactly as Loki imagined. Young, thrill-chasing, hungry for adventure, then shifted gears and asked plainly if Loki meant to buy the sword. Loki couldn't resist. He decided to buy the enchanted sword, excitement crackling through him. The blacksmith, wearing a faint smile, admitted he'd put the blade in the showcase to sell it, convinced his son would have wanted it that way. Silence slammed into the room as the blacksmith's face hardened. He pinned Loki with a dark, serious stare and demanded, "Are you really thinking of going to the rocket plains without armor?" Under the piercing question, Loki ripped off his mask and spat the truth. He planned to storm the Rock of Plains unarmored. He knew it looked reckless, but confidence surged through him. His stats had already maxed for his level, and he was convinced he could take on the region's monsters safely, if he stayed razor-sharp and moved with caution. The blacksmith begs him not to sell the sword until his armor's finished, trying to stop him rushing off, while Loki steels himself, remembering how he forged strength by facing danger alone, never leaning on guild tricks or the recommended level. And while others wait for backup, he charges straight into peril, because anyone else might hang back, but he won't. Loki snarls, refusing to wait 4 days for armor. With only a knife, he'll still venture into the new hunting grounds, locking steady eyes on the blacksmith as he declares his choice. He must move forward. Risk be damned. Panic claws at the blacksmith as he watches Loki blaze with the same reckless spirit his son once had. Grief strangled his voice as he choked out that he'd poured his blood and soul into forging the sword. And while he hammered it, his son died. A memory rips through him. After a crushing silence, he snaps, "Wait there, Loki," and strides away, the air crackling with tension. The blacksmith returns bearing armor, straps it onto Loki and declares, "Fits perfectly." And when Loki asks if it was his son's, the smith's grin goes hard and sarcastic. This armor laughs at even the magic of an air-praying mantis. It'll spare you from stupid, reckless deaths. Tension crackles. Loki tosses an ironic smile. "It focuses me," he says. And the blacksmith pins him with a stone stare, swearing that if Loki dies in that armor, he'll follow him and kill him again. Behind the shop on the training field, the blacksmith sizes up Loki, armored and sword in hand, and barks for the boy to unleash and test his strikes. Mid-training, Loki feels the sword's gravity and destiny anchor in his bones, and asks if the blacksmith had been secretly waiting for someone worthy to wield the forgotten sword. Loki lashes the blade in firm, nimble arcs. Every strike screams he's mastered the sword. The blacksmith watches in silence, eyes misting, touched as the boy tugs at memories of his son. When asked about the sword, Loki smiles and praises it, Feather light, effortless to wield, flawless in the hand. And with a hard, determined look, he thanks them from the heart and swears, "I will not die." Loki finally seized a special weapon and armor that thrummed with living emotion. Clutching them, he's ready to burst out of the tutorial area and charge into bigger challenges in this new world, determination burning as he already plots his next steps. Loki slams a pouch of coins forward, insisting on paying for the weapon and armor he'd been given. But the blacksmith plants his hammer, glares, and flat out refuses. The seller snapped the items were never for sale. Loki screamed he had the money, couldn't convince him, and their shouting blew up so loud it dragged the whole neighborhood into the chaos. Only able to buy the sword, Loki seethed at not affording the armor and marched to the church. His last stop. He'd only ever spoken to the person in charge a few times, but was stepping inside for the first time. And though the leftover coins should have felt like a game-worthy win, a knot of confusion sat heavy in his gut. Loki swept into the hushed church, eyes drinking in the goddess statues as he marveled at their grace. Then spotted a kneeling worshiper and asked if that was the proper way to pray. The caretaker smiled, greeted him, noted his refined bearing, and assured him it was indeed a form of prayer. Loki storms into the status room and discovers his standing is tracked by a stone in plain view. Exposed to everyone, a cold discomfort coils through him. He fires the question, can the offering's value change what it reveals? The nun recoils, eyes snapping wide at the sudden probe. A stern voice snaps, "That's basically begging for punishment." Loki stammers a hasty apology, cheeks flaming with mortification. Loki uncovers that lavish donations to the church score invites to events hosted by the powerful Fennel Empire, but they're out in a rural backwater, so it never reaches them. He stares at the gilded halls, suddenly aware money runs this church, as someone else storms in grinning, slapping down a huge offer and itching to take part in the ritual. Loki drops the act and confesses he came to the church for the class selection. He discovers the ritual is treated like a divine blessing. Get the prayer right and you can steer the class you're given. And stunned, he vows to accept whatever fate hands him and wring every advantage from it on his journey. The nun bellows that choosing a class summons a divine blessing, pouring class-linked experience, stat gains, and skill growth into you. And Loki's eyes snap sharp as he realizes each class hides unique skills and even its own rank ladder. His jaw dropped at another RPG-like system, but he grit his teeth, focused, and accepted this as his new reality. Realized his biggest problem was his lack of power. And Loki heard the nun whisper about the possibility of a rare, special class. Only divine revelation can unveil it. She said the city hosts only beginner and intermediate rank classes, yet an ancient priest who still receives revelations ignites a slim chance for something far greater. Curiosity crackling, Loki presses for more as the nun dashes off to fetch the priest. They drag Loki before the city priest's trail, a revered man who still channels divine revelations. And Loki, stunned by his presence, feels the weight of the moment settle like iron in his chest. Trail stays ice cold, proving he can still execute the class selection as the rare wielder who can unveil a special class. Loki, baffled by the process, blurts out whether he can still claim divine protection, and as he watches and listens, realization slams into him. This special class wields one-of-a-kind skills, and the gift of divine revelation can only be used so many times. Priest Trail plants a steady hand on his shoulder, voice warm and steady, reassuring him that everyone comes from different roots. What truly matters is never stopping learning. Loki's gaze snapped to 6 towering statues of the goddesses: commerce, sin, life, love, war, fertility. Loki reflects that they all love humans equally as a playful, acorn-headed figure bounces for his attention. But he shrugs her off, cold-eyed, knowing she's not one of the revered goddesses. Loki snapped, "Only 6 goddesses in this world?" The priest nodded gravely. "Yes. During the class selection, every prayer is offered to those 6. He can single out one to worship, but he's urged to pray to all. Praying to every deity could spawn an unexpected class. To seize the revelation, he must lock his mind on the class he desires, and then the ritual is ready to begin." Loki drops to his knees before the goddesses' statues, pouring out a raw, sincere prayer as he pleads to be granted the class he desperately craves. Pick one that skyrockets in growth, crushes foes with raw strength, tanks hits with ironclad defense, and dominates every melee clash. Consumed by that desire, a sudden, unexpected stir rips his attention away. During the prayer, Loki keeps his eyes closed as a cold, uncanny presence coils around him. The goddesses whispering among themselves and the words call and prepare pounding in his mind. Moments after a calm voice instructs him, he may peel his eyes open, and whatever's hiding is about to explode into view. Loki's eyes explode open to towering divine figures, and a chill rips through him. The voice he'd heard was young and not human. She could be one of the goddesses, and the air crackles as something extraordinary unfolds. A divine figure gapes at Loki and blurts, "Who are you?" His presence rattles everyone, even the goddesses. Loki reels, dazed by the place and straining to tell if he's truly standing before the goddesses, when a sudden voice cuts him off. Impatient, one of them snarled for him to say who he was, then slammed him into the dirt before he could react. A figure strides in, ice in her voice as she snaps, "Loki is an anomaly in this world," mercilessly adding she doesn't care who he is and making it painfully clear he's not welcome. The dark figure pins Loki with an icy stare, thrusts out a hand and vows she'll erase him from existence. Loki crumples, sweat beading on his brow as he realizes his life hangs by a thread before a power he can't comprehend. Seconds before Loki is wiped out, a goddess hurls herself into the attack and stops it dead, roaring that he's an anomaly and they haven't heard his side. Tension explodes, and he finally gets a chance to explain. After nearly being wiped from existence, Loki stands as cool, calm voices press him to say who he is and why he's in that world. Shaking, he blurts his alias, Loki, then admits his real name is Mamiya Yuto, and that he was snatched into a mysterious space with no clue why, practically kidnapped and dumped there by accident. Loki swears a godlike figure dragged him into this world but shuts down whenever her name comes up, and the goddesses, astonished that neither their mind-reading nor their sight can touch him at odd moments, huddle and murmur he must have tumbled through a dimensional rift by accident, not lying. Whispers say he's either had his memory wiped or he's running on some unknown force, and that sets off red flags. He might be dangerous. The goddesses explode into a fierce council, clashing over whether Loki should be allowed to live. He's an unknown, dangerous wild card. Loki throws up his hands, voice raw, swearing he knows nothing. A brutal command, "Be silent, anomaly," cuts him off mercilessly, and the air snaps as desperation floods him. Fed up with being treated like a threat, Loki detonates in rage, rockets to his feet and roars, accusing the gods of being selfish, incompetent, and arbitrary. After everything he's suffered, he refuses to be judged without being heard. Loki storms up to the goddesses, fury crackling in his voice as he snarls he tried to speak respectfully, but they brushed him aside. Rage boiled as one man demanded his execution, branding the deed unforgivable. The other coldly sanctioned the killing, even knowing it would ripple through the city and wound its residents. Loki erupts, hurling criminals at the goddesses for trampling the innocent. Then a flood of memory crashes over him, the moment he was kidnapped, ripped from his world. Tossed into a forest with no explanation and forced to survive like a cruel game, he explodes in revolt. He has no idea why they brought him, and he'll never be branded the villain. Loki erupts, roaring that he was hurled into an unknown world with no food, no water, no survival skills, forced into savage fights and reduced to gnawing raw fish to survive. Then he stumbled into Bezart town, met people for the first time, and hope ignited. All he wanted was to carve out a good life in that strange world. Tears blurring his vision, Loki falls to his knees and begs for an answer. Why is he treated like this? He can't fathom why they're punishing him for nothing more than trying to survive. He clutches the memory of how that world welcomed him, a warmth his own parents never gave, and all he ever wanted was to live in peace. Convinced his end was moments away, Loki sank into sorrow, picturing rebirth in a world where effort mattered. The promise he'd made not to die burned in his mind, but with no way out, he surrendered to resignation, until an unexpected voice shattered the silence. A goddess locks eyes with Loki and demands, "Who are you truly?" Tears carving tracks down his face, he answers with raw sincerity. He's not a god, just a man who clung to life and began to find joy in this world. He has no answers, he only wants to live. A goddess locks eyes with Loki, saying they sometimes reincarnate souls from other worlds and bestow special skills, then asks if he received any before arriving. Loki freezes, surprise flaring as his mind scrambles for an answer. Loki smirks as two game-changing skills hit. Youth Restoration snaps his 32-year-old looks back to youth, and Status Screen splashes his attributes up in his MP. He spots two hidden fields on his screen. Their contents are a complete mystery to him. The goddess's eyes blaze as they confirm he's telling the truth, then lean in, hungry to unravel every secret of this skill. Loki beams and says his status screen is ripped straight from the games back home, laying out attributes, skills, and a sprawling skill tree, with spaces for blessings and titles glaring empty because he hasn't earned any yet. The goddesses stagger. This is beyond their divine sight. When Loki grins and unveils a skill system that shatters the ordinary, he reads every tiny skill point, knows exactly how many he needs to learn something new, and tosses points around at will. They gape, and one snaps. Only a high-level god could be behind this. Loki confesses his skill can't threaten the world and expects the goddesses to finally see his truth. They blanch, realizing he's no menace and that they rushed in recklessly. Loki erupts again, indignation crackling as he roars that they tried to kill him without even hearing his story. Remorse ripped through the goddess. Neil, voice raw, apologized to Loki with brutal sincerity for trying to kill him without listening. Startled, he accepts their apology. It's fine if they understand his situation. Then he winces, apologizes for his harsh words, and drives the conversation back to why he came to the church. Loki lunges for the class menu and recoils when he realizes he can't pick a single class. The goddesses declare, bound by their lesser power, they can only bestow blessings on those born into this world, and he isn't one of them. He pleads to be sent back to his original world. They confess they lack that power too. Alicia reaches for Loki, pleading that it's now their duty to guide him to salvation, and at last his eyes lock onto her face. Loki's gaze locks on her and he freezes, breath catching, cheeks flushing as her beauty utterly derails him. Loki staggers as a new skill pops up. Divine Revelation. Priests only, granting him the power to hear the goddess's messages once a day. Stunned, Loki snapped that someone's been watching him non-stop. They admit it but insist they can only see his status. Alicia steps in to calm him, and says he can reach out whenever he needs help. And Loki, still suspicious, says he'd rather never set foot in the church again. Loki erupted when he learned Divine Revelation only let the goddesses speak to him while he couldn't answer. And Alicia jumped in, declaring she'd fix it by burning nearly all her power to grant him the ultra-rare, priestess-only skill Celestial Channeling as her apology. Then warned she'd slip into a deep rest, leaving everyone stunned. Loki snaps awake, reality slamming in, rips open his skill list and discovers the rare Celestial Channeling. It lets him speak directly with the goddesses. Stripped of classes and blessings, he grins and declares this the true kickoff of his Isekai life. With the new skill locked to one use a day, he vows to test it before bed, worry gnawing at him over Alicia-sama's condition. Loki fires up the channeling skill and a tidal wave of goddess voices slams into him, all vying to be heard, bickering over who should speak, throwing up rules, threats of divine punishment, and raw jealousy that he'd been closer to others. Some heap praise, others drone about duty, and Loki, trying to stay calm, blurts, "Is Alicia okay?" But swallowed by the chaos, he can only manage a stunned, timid hello. Loki discovers the legendary Celestial Channeling, a once-a-day ability that devours 50 mempa. Energy drained and fed up with zero useful info, he snapped, roared, "This skill's trash!" and flung the notebook away like it burned him. He forces a smile and jams optimism into his head, but displeasure tightens in his gut as he wonders whether useless goddesses always come bundled with setups like this. Loki's eyes narrow as he pieces together how low-ranked goddesses nudge reality in corners while the high god Fursa rules the world whole. Pinned beneath their absolute sway, he digs in and vows to live his own way. He glares at the sky, wonders if even this choice is already in the Acorn Head's hands, and answers himself, no. He begged them to listen. They shrugged him off, leveled chilling threats, and stamped out his voice. He snatched a rare skill that let him speak with the goddesses, and the instant he activated it, it slammed into him. Useless. Just 60 brutal seconds of relentless one-sided chatter. Fatigue clawing at him, he bulldozes through his routine without rest, brushes off every warning, vows to hunt again in the Rock of Plains, and insists everything's fine. And he'll bulldoze through the exhaustion, all by himself. Frustration boiled in him as Trail's kindness shackled him with guilt. He couldn't settle on a new job, even burst into arguments over offerings, and when he finally reached the Rock of Plains, it felt like wasted time because of the goddesses. So he called the whole situation a disaster. Lost in thought as he walked, a sudden, unexpected sight yanked his gaze. He shoulders his load through the fair's roar, eyes sharp and mind still inward as merchants hawk wares and residents stream between the stalls. The protagonist reached the city's north gate and froze, awestruck by the relentless tide of motion surging through it. Compared to Southgate, this side teems with stalls and people, the air crackling until the whole place feels like a true fantasy world. He locks onto a group heading for the Rock of Plains and melts into their wake, tailing them like a ghost to reach his destination. At the Rocket Plains, he finally launches his hunt, excitement crackling through him as he spots that nobody hunts alone and stays unshaken, scanning the open field and rival teams in motion. Noting the upside, monsters are easy to spot, and the danger, anyone could snatch his basket, so he strides forward, senses honed and ready to strike. Loki's first challenge swoops in, an air mantis. The enemy melts into the foliage, but he stays ice cold and decides to test his skills. The moment he spots the hidden creature, he locks on, steels himself and lunges with fierce determination. The instant Loki spots the air mantis, he fires up his detection skill and locks onto the enemy's presence. He rockets in like a missile, a razor-precise strike landing with brutal certainty. Target felled, the fight over. Loki zeroes in on a poisonous rat and strikes to end it fast before its scent summons a swarm of its kin. He explodes forward, but his blow drags. Too slow. He sees the mistake, can't pull back, and the fight spirals into chaos that slams him flat-footed. Loki obliterates the venomous rat, gains poison resistance on the spot, and to everyone's shock the skill instantly rockets to level 2. A thrill of curiosity explodes through him as he realizes these monsters, even on scraps of intel, still deliver staggering returns. He zeroes in on the poison mice as prime prey and pounces, determined to exploit that advantage to the fullest. Loki storms back from the hunt with 21 poisonous rats, one crippled by brutal damage, while the rest earned top marks. He bristled at how effortless the fights had been, doubting if training too long in Palmyra had dulled him. The air mantis was child's play, and he was itching to charge into Uluwiv Forest earlier than planned. Loki stares down his recent wins and wakes to the old trap, thinking you're invincible, then watching arrogance topple you. When he realizes the forest question was a test, he plants his feet and vows to stay grounded. He vows he won't advance to the next area until he's absolutely certain he's fully prepared in the Rock of Plains. A warning snaps at Loki. Brute strength and lone hunts in Uluwiv Forest won't bring riches. The loot is heavy, orc meat the most prized, and he feels the hard truth. He can fell countless monsters, but his pack will hold only so much. The attendant urges him to pause, think twice, and comb through the information before moving forward. And the protagonist gives a weary nod, resignation written across his face. Loki melts into the shadows, eyes locked on the same crew he'd spotted earlier as they pocket the payoff from their mission. Each is about to snag 41,000 soon and pocket 400 beaky. Enough to buy a few days' rest. Reality smacks him. Most hustle for about 10,000 beaky a day. He'd live comfortably on half that, and just watching has already schooled him in the ways of seasoned adventurers. Loki eyes the group with curiosity, tempted for a beat, then coldly shuts the idea down. Interesting, but a dead end for him. Even if he hired a carrier, he needed someone who could sprint at his side and match his relentless pace on hunts. It hits him. The true obstacle isn't power, but clashing goals. Everyone else chases comfort and stability while he burns to shove his strength to its absolute limit. And in the middle of that realization, someone suddenly calls his name. Someone blurts out when Loki will form a group and he's blindsided. He scrambles to hide, stammering that he was thinking about it, while the place buzzes with whispers that this promising newcomer, Amanda's favorite, has everyone watching. The seasoned adventurer locked onto the scene, eyes razor bright as he silently sized up the boy. 4 days later, Loki cracked it. XP scales with a monster's skill. After beating just one poisonous rat, his poison resistance jumped to level 2 and is already at level 3. Palmyra monsters only sit at level 1, so the poison mice must be level 4. Hence the lightning-fast XP and proof that environment and prey drive skill evolution. Before he even sets foot in Uluwiv, Loki swears he'll crank his poison resistance to at least level 6, shooting for 7, by hunting monsters packing high-level skills. He learns the hard way that staking out a single spot to hunt is useless there. He has to guard the basket without blinking. Then he uncovers a grotesque secret. The poisonous rats are cannibals, turning a tense watch into a full-blown nightmare. Loki wanted total efficiency, hunt everything in one spot. But when he realized the trip back to Bazaar to store his materials would swallow 2 hours, the plan fell apart. He pictures a sky-high platform that hoists his basket safe and untouchable above the monster's reach. He pictures shoveling the earth into a heap, scoffs at how absurd that is. Then his eyes blaze. He learned earth magic from the Huli mole. Loki grins, can't resist testing earth's magic, and tosses out a taunting, "Ground rise," as a joke. Shock rips through him. Against all odds, it works. He snarls the command again and the ground surges up. His mana drains away, proof the spell fired, and stunned. He remembers he couldn't use fire magic before. So why is Earth answering him now? Loki's eyes blaze as the magic snaps to life. He starts to suspect the secret hides in the feet, not the hands he trusted before, and hungry to prove it, he casts the spell again. He forces the ground to surge even higher. Monsters can still clamor the mound, but his eyes blaze at how much more earth he's summoned. Loki hones earth magic, shaping and straining to conjure towering pillars. He forces up several columns that never reach his target height and learns the trickier the command, the more mana it devours. He tries an over-the-top move and the magic flat-out refuses to spark. Then it hits him. The spell obeys tone and phrasing, so acting becomes everything, and he finally tastes the first sparks of how it works. A bolt of insight hits Loki. By chaining keywords within the limits of his current earth magic, he sculpts spells with razor-sharp precision. He tests the idea by yelling, "Create a long pillar," and the ground shatters as a colossal earth spire erupts, proving the key lies in the exact choice and combination of words. Loki whooped as earth magic ripped a towering solid pillar from the ground. Finally, he can hunt from a fixed spot without fretting over the basket's safety, until his grin collapses when he looks up and realizes he never planned how to get the basket back down. Loki whooped, slinging a basket bulging with defeated monsters as he rode the high of a perfect hunt. He laughs at how his whole idea of magic flipped. He remembers flinging a useless grilling spell at a fish, then learning spells come from the feet, not the hands. Lowering the basket from the pillar nearly broke him, but the result has him beaming at how far he's come. Loki's fire magic roars to life, and he erupts into a stunned, ecstatic shout that makes a nearby adventurer jump back in terror. Someone spits gossip about a newcomer who always goes alone, clearly pointing at him. Then the chatter snaps into a sharp stare. Is this lone behavior why he's still alone? Loki, burning with embarrassment, fumbles to hide his shock. Aiden swaggered in, declared his name with a cocky grin, and told Loki to count himself lucky. He'd been offered the chance to join his group. Loki wore a mask of total disinterest and politely but bluntly dismissed him with a cool, no thanks. And Aiden froze. He hadn't seen that coming. Adam snapped when they refused his offer, insisting hunting in a pack is the best way, and that newcomers must lean on veterans. Insults and threats rain down, but Loki holds his ground, calm and resolute. He declares he prefers to act alone and is ready for it. He brushes off every taunt while a seething Aiden lashes out, threatening to report him to the guild. A guild rep snarled at Loki that Aiden only wanted his rewards, frantically trying to secure the newcomer before a rival could snatch him. She couldn't play favorites as staff, but vowed to slap a formal warning on Aiden's group. Loki thanked her, saying that alone was a huge help, and she beamed at his resolve, praising him for standing firm and rejecting the group. Loki couldn't stop replaying the trouble he sparked in Beezard. It wasn't about raw strength, but messy local grudges that could entangle his life. The guild drilled him to own the fallout, yet being trailed or threatened would still shred everything. He believed Bazaar was full of good people, but now he realizes he's stumbled into an awkward situation. After 4 days of hunting, he climbed to level 9 and vows to push to at least level 11 before returning to Palmyra, mostly to avoid crossing paths with Aiden's group again. At night, Loki paces the shadows, desperate that the trouble with Aiden's group won't spiral out of control. Next morning, Loki reels at his first emergency mission. Exterminate poisonous rats. The reward's been bumped because an outbreak may be brewing, and Loki's blood runs cold as he wonders if his recent actions sparked it. Loki's gaze locks on a team barreling out, weapons bristling as they charge into an emergency mission. He rockets into the field, basket strapped tight, and in no time he's carving through monsters with surgical strikes, relentless in his hunt. Loki pushes on with the hunt, then notices Aiden's group shadowing him. Gasping but relentless, they thunder after him across the field. Pushed to the edge by their insistence, Loki snapped, bellowing his complaints as frustration seethed through his voice. Loki, exhausted by the endless chase, snaps, "How long are you going to follow me?" They plaster on casual grins and insist they're just shifting zones. Loki's eyes burned through the excuse as he snapped, "Find another spot. Hunting together wastes time." After a razor-sharp standoff, Aiden grits his teeth and grudgingly relents. Loki narrows his eyes, sure they're eyeing what he carries in the basket. Loki flashes a grin and confirms his earth magic has surged to level 3. He can now wield up to 4 keywords. To test his power, he intones the new spell, Create Deep Long Pillar. And a far larger pillar rips from the ground as Aiden's group gape, stunned by Loki's growing mastery of magic. Loki explodes into triumphant laughter as the new earth spell hits perfectly on his first try, and Aiden's group gapes in disbelief, whispering who he really is. Loki leans in, eyes flashing. His deep command fired true, and the pillar plunged downward exactly on cue. Loki heads for the door and spits, "I'm going hunting," forcing a bold mask over his nerves. Steel in his eyes, he vowed to reveal the real difference between his skills and Aiden's group. A sarcastic good luck landed, but he charged on, hell-bent on proving his worth alone. Loki spots the basket crowning the pillar, sizes up the distance and pictures exactly 5 meters, centers his power, then with a sly grin intones, "Create 5 meters in length, pillar," as a fresh column rockets up to the perfect height. Loki's stomach dropped as he snatched the basket from the pillar's peak, his mind instantly logging 26 MP per platform and forcing him to swear to ration every last spell. Elated by the experiment's result, and thrilled he can hunt far more efficiently in the plains, he smiles, brandishes his sword and rushes back into the field. Time to hunt more. Loki staggers back, every step heavy and ragged, utterly spent after a relentless day of hunting. Loki staggered under a basket so stuffed he could barely carry it. When he shoved his haul at the evaluator, the sheer volume ignited an uproar in the guild and launched an emergency mission. No other hunter saw anything odd, so the commotion boiled down to Loki hunting far too much. When they pin the emergency mission on him, Loki snaps that the poisonous rats running wild aren't his fault. Yet he can't hide that his relentless hunting set the chaos loose. He zeroes in on hunting more, demands a bigger basket and that his pay be brought as usual. The evaluators gape at the sheer quantity and top-tier quality he's hauled in. Loki admitted a full basket left him breathless, yet he sprinted through the hunt at a savage pace, leaving the evaluators gaping that he ran with that weight and proving his iron endurance is why he hauls back so much material. The scene slams shut as local staff erupt in shouts, demanding everyone return to work. Loki groans under the ridiculous load and swears he needs a custom-made basket, then strides off to tell Amanda about the day's events, only for Adin to drop in, smell an opening, and snap at Loki to hand something over. Loki ignores him outright. Adin storms away, every step crackling with frustration. Amanda and the guild storm Loki, accusing him after Adenti and his crew lie that he joined them and twist his words into a sham agreement. They even demanded a split of the rewards. Loki exploded in indignant denials while the rival group's blatant manipulation shoved the whole scene into chaos. Loki's jaw tightens as the rival crew forces the fight to exploit him. They're no match for his skill, but while everyone else backs off, they charge on with reckless insistence. Snapping from non-stop taunts, Loki demanded their rank and earnings. Amanda sneered and spat, "All rank F, 42,000 biki today," proving they're far beneath him, so Loki vowed he wouldn't stay silent. Amanda rips their lie wide open with one blunt question. Was Loki on your team? They'd pretended he was to grab a cut, and when the truth hits, she bulldozes them into coughing up the fair split she demanded. Loki hurls the 5,000 biki in their faces, impatiently snarling that only a fool would trade 400,000 biki solo for a worthless group, and the room explodes when someone snaps, "Shut up!" Loki bellowed a final warning. If they keep tailing and harassing him, he'll brand them as enemies, as monsters. Cold as a blade, he snarls he'll slaughter anyone who opposes or aids those who pursue him, calling anyone who disrupts his hunt nothing but goblin filth. The group freezes, stunned. After Loki's direct threat, the air ignites. Dent erupts, shouting at him not to think he's better than everyone, and the nervous receptionist scrambles to call the guildmaster. Soon the grizzled guildmaster bursts in, fed up with the late-night racket, and snaps at Loki to come with him. He's disturbing the others. A man snarls, laying out how he'll force respect from everyone in his path. Elsewhere in the office, someone stood silent, eyes hard. Certain consequences would crash down on anyone who ignored the warning signs. The hunter's jaw clenched and fury erupted. He snarled the judgment was unfair. The older man stayed steady, saying he'd listen to both sides before deciding and refused to take a side. The boy watches, relief crashing through him. He's here. The older man vows to sidestep any situation that could snuff out someone's life. He slams down a warning. If those two clash, innocent people will get hurt. The hunter bristles and scoffs, furious that it's all blown out of proportion. The man snarls that the boy's strength is freakishly powerful, enough to cow anyone, and the hunter's gut clenches with cold unease. He feels every wary glance like a hot brand, and wrestles with the urge to unleash a glimpse of his true strength. Accusers cry foul. They say the group baited the boy and forged the reports. He slams down his verdict. They've crossed the line. By the guild's code, they're banished for good, stripped of their hunter ranks and barred from the hunt forever. The man snaps that the case nearly exploded into a courtroom battle. He insists that even after the expulsion, they can still hunt for new work. Loki nods in agreement and everyone moves on, calling the mess settled. The boy watched the decision and seethed that it was far too lenient, nowhere near enough. The others stared, shocked by the icy, unyielding steel in his reaction. The boy endures the same punishment handed to the others, then slams his demand for personal compensation onto the table. They begged until their voices broke, but he stood unmoved, snapping that they should have thought about the risks sooner. Cold as a blade, he decides anyone who tries to use him deserves punishment. He vows to haunt them forever, locking them in endless suffering so they'll never forget him. He slammed the point home. This isn't a game you can just reset and play again. The man warns that if they push too hard it will end badly, and Loki snaps back without hesitation. Grinning like a predator, he says he'd love that, would even kill, but he's biting down on it and holding himself back. He snarled that if they were criminals, he could legally execute them. All three crashed to their knees before the boy, tears streaking their faces as they pleaded for his forgiveness. They slammed every last coin and piece of equipment onto the table. They retreat, shame burning their faces and defeat weighing their steps, while the boy watches, silent and unblinking. The boy grins, thanks him, and slips a small reward into his palm. The man studies him and asks, "Is this your new way of acting?" The boy admits he might have exaggerated, but his voice blazes. He'll never tolerate anyone who hurts others without a second thought. The man nods, jaw tight, knowing one life alone won't be enough to make up for the damage. The boy insisted the potion be handed to Jink and the others, confessing he owed them a favor. She blinks in shock, then snaps into action, volunteering to help and cheering Loki's gutsy attitude as she shoulders the load. Striding forward, the man snapped, "Maybe it's time we reevaluate the boy's ranking." He fires a stark warning that it could happen again and asks him to be careful. The boy agrees, insisting he won't stay put, but will do his best not to draw attention. He fixes an otherworldly stare on the boy, and every suspicion he'd harbored since their first meeting snaps into cold, undeniable truth. He jolts as realization slams into him. She deliberately tested his grasp of language, and suspicion snaps taut in his chest. The man blurts that he knows Loki came from another world, and the boy reels, shock snapping into cold suspicion about the man's motives. The man throws up his hands, trying to calm him, urgently insisting he only needs help identifying something, and even dangles a reward to seal the deal. The man dares Loki to accept the mission, pitching it as a risky gamble to earn his trust. Suspicion coils in Loki, yet curiosity yanks him into saying yes to the request. He locks the rendezvous at the guild for noon, shoots a grateful nod and a quick, "Thanks for the help," then strides off. Loki strides toward the guild, mistrust burning as the man's presence sets his teeth on edge, when a voice suddenly calls his name, declaring herself the goddess of war, and Loki snaps to attention, stunned and razor alert. The goddess fixes Loki with a fierce gaze and declares that everyone will wait in the wings to speak to him again the moment he's ready. Loki snaps. He meant to ask her something, but irritation claws through him as the memory of the skill that caused trouble before hits, and he vows he'll be far more careful this time. Loki slams down Divine Call and rips open a channel straight to the goddess Susarin. She proclaims she's the goddess of abundance, crackling with excitement to finally speak to him directly, and laughing that everyone loves watching the mortal world. And Loki realizes his higher level lets him keep the conversation going longer. Goddess Ristea cuts into the conversation like thunder, locking onto Loki and demanding he explain why he reached out. She snaps into a cold, direct stance, razor bright and unshakable, and Loki is floored. When the skill starts reading his thoughts, he knows he can speak freely. Loki snaps that he only just learned to wield magic, even though he'd met the conditions long ago, and he turns on the goddess. What could have caused this change? She rattles off several possibilities, then shrugs. This one's simply who he is. The truth slams into Loki. It all began after that church visit. The goddess proclaims magic flows from spirits who lend power for mana. Yet with Loki, not a single spirit or goddess could detect his presence, and fury boiled up inside him. It hit him like a lightning bolt. Without meeting the goddesses, magic would have stayed forever out of reach. Loki blurts a quick apology for complaining so much, then beams that he feels worlds better now. He pressed the goddess about one specific skill, how to stash items in a special space, and she nodded, letting him proceed. Loki snaps a question about spatial magic and finds a traveler from another world has already burned a skill point on it. Stunned, he curses how short the call was as it cuts off. He replayed every lesson, felt the goddess's words snap into place, and knew something massive would go down at the guild tomorrow. Excitement crackled through Loki. He knew, with a roar in his chest, that his true journey was finally beginning. Suddenly, a strange noise rips through the air, and unable to make sense of it, he realizes his consciousness is slipping away at terrifying speed.